guests joining us online. Today's seminar on India and UN peacekeeping and appraisal is being held at the backdrop of the ministerial level debates on the challenges and opportunities arising from the application of technology and innovation in peacekeeping, organized by India during its presidency at the United Nations Security Council. We have a distinguished panel of speakers who, in addition to having held high positions in the government of India, have served in many of India's UN peacekeeping missions. We look forward to the rich insights they will share with us. And now invite our Director General, Ambassador Sujan Shenoy, to share his welcome remarks and take over the proceedings of the seminar.
Thank you, Sindhu. General Nambiar, Ambassador Nambiar, friends, good morning to all of you. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all today to our webinar on the theme India and UN Peacekeeping and Appraisal. Let me begin by acknowledging the fact that it is very rare to have two brothers with us today, General Nambiar and Ambassador Nambiar, who between them have actually dominated the military and diplomatic aspects of UN peacekeeping as practitioners for a very long time. And as far as Ambassador Nambiar is concerned, I've also had the privilege of serving under him when he was Joint Secretary East Asia. So welcome to all of you, sir. We thought we would do this webinar primarily because it is our mandate to discuss key issues relating to defense, international security, international relations, but more so because this month of August, past month of August, India was the president of the UN Security Council during its 2-year non-permanent membership. And we did take a number of initiatives at the level of the Prime Minister of India, the Foreign Minister of India, the permanent representative, the Foreign Secretary, covering key themes such as maritime security, counterterrorism, and technology with regard to peacekeeping operations. And so we thought it would be befitting and entirely in keeping with our charter and mandate that we arrange this hybrid webinar today. Let me make a few remarks to really set the ball rolling. We do have a very distinguished panel that will elaborate on each of these themes. But the first obvious point that I want to make is that the UN Charter emphasizes the international community's determination to collectively strive for peace. But collective peace has always and often remained an elusive goal. Ethno-nationalism, overlapping notions of sovereignty, and the creation of new borders in the process of decolonization, various independence movements, these have all compounded difficulties. The decades of the Cold War, even Marxist movements, these created proxy interests in many emerging nations of Asia and Africa. Since the mandate for all peacekeeping operations is approved by the UN Security Council, it is an unquestionable fact of life that the permanent members of the UNSC play a disproportionate role in determining the range and scope of any peacekeeping mission. Most PKOs are themselves a compromise, in my view, between the great powers that wield veto power. Their core interests are involved. Great powers also resort to direct action first, acting singly or in tandem with like-minded countries, followed by next post facto sanctions by the UNSC. And we've seen a number of such examples. The US entry into the Korean War in 1950, led by General MacArthur, is but one example, where the mission evolved in quick time to become a US-led UN force. In the case of Iraq, former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan is on record as having stated that the US intervention was illegal since it was not mandated by the UN. Just as there is a division in the world between haves and have-nots, there is also a certain class consciousness of sorts in the world of peacekeeping operations. This is not a theme that we often speak of. We only speak about the number of troops that we contribute, the number of missions that we participate in. But there is a darker side to peacekeeping operations that must be reviewed, at least at the level of such discourse in think tanks. Great powers are prone to resorting to action under Chapter 7 of the Charter, authorizing the use of force for peace enforcement in line with their interests. The NATO ISAF mission in Afghanistan is such an example, even though it has ended up as what many would call a failure. The UN mission in the former Yugoslavia, which was commanded by General Satish Nambiar, started out primarily with a mandate under Chapter 6 for the peaceful settlement of disputes, but soon took on Chapter 7 attributes in Bosnia, where ethnic cleansing was at its peak. I happened to be at the permanent mission of India to the United Nations then and could see a lot of this unfolding before our very eyes. Great powers have often sought to use UN peacekeeping operations to suit their interests, and I want to relate this to the Indian context. In recent years, Pakistan, with China's help, has tried to rake up the Jammu and Kashmir issue at the UN, particularly after the abrogation of Article 370. It sought to double the strength of UNMOGIP. It set a mission that has long outlived its utility as a monitoring force for the ceasefire line in Jammu and Kashmir. And this similar agreement and the replacement of the CFL by the line of control should have seen the end of UNMOGIP. But vested interests have ensured that it continues in the absence of any sunset clause in the mission. UNMOGIP's limited mandate renders it incapable, from our point of view, of monitoring the terrorist havens on the Pakistani side of the line of control or preventing cross-border infiltration. Nor is it capable of preventing the frequent ceasefire violations. Since we do not report ceasefire violations to the UNMOGIP, nor allow it to monitor the situation on our side of the LOC, rightly so, whereas Pakistan does, the report presented by the UN Secretary General on UNMOGIP's functioning is always skewed. You will see a large number of ceasefire violations there by India and a blank there by Pakistan, because we don't report, they report. The government of India has rightly taken various steps to ask UNMOGIP to vacate government properties in India, which had earlier been provided free of charge. Action has also been taken to monetize various other facilities that were earlier being provided free of cost to UNMOGIP. And I am happy to say that I contributed somewhat to this evolution from the little niche that I had in the NSCS a decade ago. The primary objective of peacekeeping is to assist countries torn by conflict to create conditions for lasting peace. Peacekeeping derives its strength from global legitimacy, burden sharing, and the ability to mobilize military and police from around the globe. Since the UN's inception, 1 million individuals from more than 125 countries have served in 71 peacekeeping operations. India, as you all know, is a founding member of the United Nations and one of its first and largest and finest contributors for maintaining peace and security. India has contributed more than 250,000 troops over the years, participated in more than 49 missions, from Korea to Congo to South Sudan. We are there. 174 Indian peacekeepers have made the supreme sacrifice. And today we have around 5,000 troops serving in around 9 missions. But the point I want to make here is that Indian peacekeepers, while being praised for their professionalism and friendly approach, even in the most challenging of circumstances, have faced certain difficulties like peacekeepers from other developing countries have faced. And this is, again, a bit of the dark side to peacekeeping operations. So when it comes to compensation for life lost, generally there is an effort that has to be made to seek some kind of non-discriminatory treatment. At least that's what one hears of the discourse surrounding this issue. The COVID pandemic, friends, has brought about new challenges, and as a reflection of India's commitment to protecting the protectors, India had donated 200,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccine for UN peacekeeping personnel. And I would also say that traditional and non-traditional security threats haunt peacekeeping operations as well. We have seen how terrorism also rears its ugly head to thwart the best of efforts that peacekeeping operations are engaged in. As a non-permanent member of the UNSC, we have taken a lead in assimilation of technologies in peacekeeping operations and to enable peacekeeping troops to meet contemporary challenges. And the 4-point framework outlined by India in August this year involves developing and strengthening mobile digital platforms and much else. And we are doing a great deal of work in this regard to cooperate with the Unite Aware platform of the UN. Anyhow, to discuss these issues, as I said before, we have a stellar lineup of very distinguished panelists with rich experience, personal experience in UN peacekeeping operations. So really, you must hear more from them. I now wish to first introduce Lieutenant General Satish Nambiar, if I can ever do that really, to an audience that knows you so well, but I will not be found wanting. I shall do that before I request you to deliver your inaugural remarks. General Nambiar, as you all know, served the Indian Army for 39 years and retired as Deputy Chief in 1994. And many of the serving officers in the room may have just joined service around the time. As DGMO, he led defense delegations for negotiations with Pakistan. He headed, as I said, the UN mission in the former Yugoslavia. He has also spent 4 long years as distinguished fellow at the IDSA, as it was then known. And he has a number of other achievements. He's a Veer Chakra by way of recognition for bravery in battle. Also, the only Padma Bhushan from the armed forces, if I'm not mistaken. And above all, an author. His book on peacekeeping, titled For the Honor of India, A History of Indian Peacekeeping, released in 2009, is a must-read for all of us who are gathered here today for this seminar. So with these few words, General Nambiar, I have the greatest of pleasure in inviting you to deliver the inaugural remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. Let me start by thanking you, Director General of the IDSA, for this invitation to come and speak at this prestigious webinar that you're having. And of course, I must also acknowledge the fact that it was initiated by son of a former contemporary of mine from the IMA, whose request I could not sort of say no to, Colonel Pillai, who happened to join the service when I was commanding a division and his battalion was serving under my command. So he's hanging around my in my vicinity for years now. And that's another reason why I couldn't have said no. Now, I think the DG has set the stage for the presentations and discussions that are to follow. So I will not try and give you any big treatise on that. But let me make a couple of remarks and start by saying that as it evolved over the years, UN peacekeeping actually became an extraordinary art that called for the use of military personnel, not to wage war, but to prevent fighting between belligerents. That's the unique nature of UN peacekeeping. To ensure the maintenance of ceasefires, to provide a measure of stability in an area of conflict while negotiations were conducted. So what must be remembered, I think, in much discussion is that to that extent it is important to distinguish between the concept of collective security and peacekeeping in the international environment. Whereas collective security is a cumulative process designed to be carried out with some degree of discrimination, but not necessarily impartially. UN peacekeeping is intended to be politically impartial and essentially non-coercive. That is the background of UN peacekeeping. Hence, that is why peacekeeping was and always has been based on a triad of principles that give it legitimacy and credibility, namely consent of the parties to the conflict, impartiality of the peacekeepers, and the use of force by lightly armed peacekeepers only in self-defense. Now, all these three principles are under very severe strain at present. That is because the premise of this was that violence in interstate and intrastate conflict can be controlled without resort to the use of force or enforcement measures. And needless to say, there are many theorists, there are also, and one may dare say, quite a few practitioners who are of the view that force needs to be met with force. Now, the point that is relevant in this context is an objective analysis of the history of conflicts to probably reveal that the use of force and enforcement measures, particularly in internal conflicts, tend to prolong the conflict rather than resolve it speedily. This is not, however, to suggest that the use of force is to be ruled out altogether. In certain circumstances, I think the use of force may well be called for as a catalyst for peaceful resolution. And in this context, an observation that I've often used in my talks in the past is attributed to Capone. I don't know if young people may not know about him. He was a gangster in Chicago in the early 20th century, I think. And that's why he's not like the appropriate authority to cope in context of human peacekeeping. But what he said was very good. And I'll just make that up to you. He said, you can get a lot more done with a kind word when you have a gun in your hand than with a kind word alone. So I think that sort of encapsulates the whole concept that you talk when you talk of use of force. Now, I will not say any more, but except that to discuss these challenges today, we have a panel which is quite outstanding in its own way, led by my eminent brother also. And I'll not go into their detailed bios because then I don't think we'll have any time. We are in a sort of very tight time frame. So my brother will first speak to you on UN, United Nations past and future. And I would request all of you, all the panelists, to kindly stick to the time frame. I'm told that there's some sort of a bell will be sounded when you have 2 minutes left. Kindly adhere to that because I don't want to ensure to sort of, use the stick as the chair when I'm around. Those days are over. So with that, I'll request my brother Ambassador Navya to make his remarks. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me here. I'm supposed to give the big picture. Before I start on this, let me tell you that just a week ago, oh no, not a little over a week ago, my brother and I were playing golf, and while we were at the tee shack, somebody came and whispered to my brother, "You know what the UNO is? It's useless nonsense organization." This is said in a flippant way, but in some ways there's a general kind of mistrust. Now my answer to them is, if it is such a useless and nonsensical organization, how could it have lasted so long? And why is it that virtually, particularly in the first 50 years of its, or 40 years of its existence, it has been the foreign ministers who used to attend. Now, in the general debate, it's almost prime ministers. There are 193 members. How has it grown almost unprecedentedly if it is an organization that does not actually inspire nations? Now, its predecessor, it's almost the last year was the 100th year, as it were, of multilateralism. And the League, which preceded the United Nations went moribund in 20 years. Now the UN is 76 years and still going strong. Something must be done by the organization in terms of meeting some of the requirements of the world. Now, I'd like to mention one or two points regarding both the League and the UN. You know, the League, in its early India was present even as a colony, as a member of the League of Nations. It represented not just British India, but also 526 Indian states. And Bikaner was, in fact, the signatory of the Versailles Treaty. But, in fact, the national leaders called it a fraud. They called, and Woodrow Wilson called it a rubber stamp. India's membership was a rubber stamp for the British. In fact, even when the San Francisco conference was held, the Congress and even Gandhi had actually opposed India being a founder member. It had said that either India at San Francisco must be represented by an Indian representative or not represented at all. Mrs. Vijayalakshmi Pandit, in fact, was sent there on behalf of the Congress, and she was not admitted into San Francisco. So, in fact, even to start with, India was, in a sense, a representative of colonial India, British interests. It was only after independence, and perhaps as the interim prime minister, when Nehru became interim prime minister, that actually India was able to assert and then take over a nationalist Indian perspective, primarily in terms of the question of apartheid and things like that. Just completely, in a sense, at variance with what the colonial masters wanted. Now, I think it is important that even in a seminar on India and peacekeeping, to know this kind of thing and the background. In fact, today, UN peacekeeping straddles all varieties, and it's almost, in a sense, a catch-all kind of a thing. It is becoming increasingly complex operations now. Let me tell you that Kofi Annan, one of the more charismatic Secretary Generals that we have had, actually said that the UN, in a sense, symbolizes four powerful ideas, which in fact reflect the deepest of mankind's concerns. 1, independence; 2, peace; 3, development; and 4, human rights. Independence is the idea that the peoples of all countries have a right to be totally independent and sovereign. Peace, the idea that sovereign states can create an international organization and procedures to replace military aggression and war. Development, the idea that all countries, independent or newly so, would purposefully pursue policies of economic and social advance to improve the welfare of the people. And finally, human rights, the idea that every individual, every country throughout the world share an equal claim to individual, not only civil and political rights, but also to economic and social freedoms. Now, Jawaharlal Nehru's major concern in the first year of involvement with the UN was, on the one hand, to preserve peace in a nuclear age where the balance of terror was operating, and the second was to dismantle the edifice of empire. And he said he felt that the success and failure of the UN, and also the success and failure of India's foreign policy, would be tested on this angle. And India was at that time one of the few independent nations of Asia and Africa which actually piloted the decolonization declaration 1514 and things like that. Now, Nehru at the same time also proposed the idea of complete ban on nuclear testing in 1954 and diffusing the tensions of the Korean War. To help him at that time was the rather controversial V.K. Krishna Menon. Very few people know that around 54 particularly, Mr. V.K. Krishna Menon was actually in the thick of diplomatic activity in order to help China in the Korean War in terms of release of U.S. release of the armistice, as well as the release of U.S. airmen, etc. And in the space of 3 months, Krishna Menon had 2 meetings with the U.S. President and 6 meetings with the Secretary of State. In those days, it was quite a record. And in fact, India was successful in releasing, securing the release of airmen, etc., and in the negotiation of the armistice. But these are things which actually they placed India's name, as it were, in the UN very, very prominently in those days. Of course, we had the question of Jammu and Kashmir and the problems of the foremost by the by the aggression by Pakistani tribesmen, and then eventually India wrote the question to the UN. And though the resolutions actually did result in the ceasefire, this problem is known to all and does not really go away. Outside the UN at that time, there was the Bandung Conference and the non-aligned movement. Meanwhile, China's nuclear testing led to a determined bid by other countries, the nuclear weapon states, to prevent any further erosion, and then you had the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. However, the core responsibility of maintaining international peace and security rested with the UN Security Council, which was described as the geopolitical cockpit of the UN system. And here, the dominant role was played by the P5. Even today, that happens. And in a sense, this was part of what in India we would call the basic structure of the Charter. Now, it is, of course, questionable whether this basic structure has now become relevant or irrelevant because of the change in the nature. But it is true that even today, in the Security Council, in particular which handles most of peacekeeping, it is the P5 that matter, and it is the P5 actions that actually have the greatest amount of importance. Now, obviously, the major role played by peacekeeping is going to be the subject of the meeting, and I'm not going to talk very much about that. India has played obviously a great role. Is that I just started? Sorry. In the peacekeeping, and you have had major commanders like Timaya, Indrajit Rike, P.S. Gyani, Premchand, General Nambiar, D.S. Lidar, Suresh Menon, and Danaikar, who's the latest in, I think it's in South Sudan. Now, unlike in the Cold War period, UN peacekeepers today have to negotiate as against interstate conflict, internal conflict, new issues of governance, fragility, state stabilization, regional rebalancing, etc., have to be talked about. And you have to now think in terms of civilian protection has been the main focus. The latest 218 for 8-point agenda talks about advancing civilian solutions, security protection. An important point is that China has now become a major kind of face in both in peacekeeping and in the financing of the peacekeeping budget. It's the second largest. And it is clear, as many people have also suggested, that their participation as well as their activity is closely related to their national interests, whether they be in South Sudan, in the DRC, or in Central Mali. And I think blue helmets are in proximity to areas like the pipelines in South Sudan and in countries, to safeguard countries which are, in a sense, affected by the BRI. It's also interesting that the latest round, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, when Mali talked about the need for, they're thinking about taking on private peacekeepers to look after the partner company of Russia has been suggested. Now, this is something which, in many ways, in much of the areas of the UN, progressively, in more than governments are now being involved. You have civil society, you have business to push some of the agenda, whether it is on development, whether it is on climate change, whether it is on even securing humanitarian human rights priorities of the UN. It's more than just member states are involved. Are we going to see something new in terms of in peacekeeping to the involvement of the private sector and business groups? This has been happening, and certainly in terms of the US involvement, this has happened. And everyone is aware of what's happened in Afghanistan and even in Iraq. Is this being considered in the UN too? In fact, there was a project which talked, a project report, which talked about the enhancement of involvement of the NGOs and other interests. Now, I'm not sure whether the kind of accountability required in peacekeeping operations can be actually ensured when profit motive becomes an important area of investing. This is something which probably you will be addressing. Now, I have not talked about the progressive change in even the attitudes towards development. Development is seen not as GNP alone by the UN, but what was developed by two major economists, Amartya Sen and Mahbubul Haq, the whole idea of human development, the Human Development Index, which again stresses the health, the whole question of not just state power, but for the people. And that's what developed eventually into the Millennium Development Goals and the SDGs, for which, both in the development of which and in the implementation of which, the Indian diplomacy, as well as our own administrative experts, have actually played a major role. Now, in terms of one of the major elements of the activities of or experiences of peacekeeping has been the question of civilian protection, and successive new generations of peacekeeping effort have concentrated on civilian protection. And this has also been discussed in terms of the experiences of Rwanda and Srebrenica. And the question of R2P has been discussed quite prominently. My brother was part of the intergovernmental panel which discussed this. But today, we are seeing while there is a logic, and I think it has been accepted by most countries, even in the developing world, that there is perhaps an innate rationale where large-scale depredations are being, in a sense, perpetrated against civilian populations for other states to intervene. But as the experience in Libya has shown, increasingly, where double tenders are adopted or when R2P is used for regime change, that can be very questionable. In fact, even long before the concept of R2P was generated, India, in a sense, and Vietnam, perhaps had in Bangladesh as well as in Cambodia, respectively, used their political and military strength in order to prevent the perpetration of large-scale genocide and mass atrocities. But at that time, that was rationalized in terms of state sovereignty. It never became anything like R2P. Today, another aspect of the impact of vulnerabilities perpetrated by external intervention as well as by misrule in states is the question of migration. Large-scale migration and refugees as part of the political conflicts and social developments in Syria, Iraq, actually Yemen, and Myanmar have actually caused major movements of refugees and migrants, which are causing huge repercussions all around the world. And it is despite the fact that countries like India have not signed on the Refugee Convention. Around 3-4 years ago, there were high-level meetings in New York which resulted in a comprehensive framework for response, what they call a comprehensive refugee response, and response in terms of meeting the basic requirements of migration. Now, that of migrant populations who are left to suffer, as it were. And this has also become a major element of the concern of the United Nations. The Office of what's called the Coordinator of Humanitarian Assistance, or OCHA, today has to look after almost 90 million of these refugees and migrants who are sometimes lodged in camps, sometimes who are actually left to the measures by receiving countries. This is part of a huge kind of concern for the United Nations, and today around $1 billion of such relief is being handled by the UN, again financed by a large number of. I think there are so many other elements like global anti-terrorism, like climate change, etc., which are again part of the overall agenda of the UN, which inevitably peacekeepers will have to be concerned about. But it is this concept of the broader, complex organization of the United Nations peacekeepers, where they come into a particular region, that actually has resulted in the UN now the department no longer calling it the Department of Peacekeeping, but peace operations covering the entire spectrum from peacemaking, peacekeeping, peace building. And that, in fact, is the kind of atmosphere, the kind of environment which most of you who Indian peacekeepers, Indian commanders will have to increasingly look at. Finally, unless the decision making on individual conflict points or sources of tension are more broadly opened out through a reform of the United Nations Security Council, I don't think the concerns of the broader world community, as represented by the developing world, can be actually be addressed. And I think it is this, therefore, that calls for a radical reform, or at least a reform of the basic structure of the Security Council, which is seen in the composition or expansion of the permanent members. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This I will not try and sum up what the speaker has said, because I think we'll have enough, hopefully sometime in the end. The next speaker is General Mono Bhagat, who talked to us on UN and peacekeeping structures. Now, he's well qualified to speak on it, because with distinguished service in the Indian Army, he has had a great deal to do with the United Nations. He was the commander of our brigade in Somalia, and later on served as the deputy military advisor at the UN headquarters and in other capacities in the field on UN missions. He's well qualified to speak to us, and I look forward to hearing your views, Mono. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. Having heard from the ambassador what the UN is all about, and I'll now touch upon how the UN does business of peacekeeping. I won't be going into the nuances of peacekeeping, but I'll just touch on the conceptual aspects. And what does peacekeeping mean, and how can it be made more worthwhile and fruitful? I thank Ambassador Shilpa, Colonel Pillai, Dr. Vichita Berry, and their team for providing this opportunity to be sharing my thoughts with you. I'll be very candid and forthright in my views, because I speak from personal observation and experience. According to the cynical or critical of the UN system, nor are my observations targeted at any individual, but basically to bring about the handicaps, the shortages, the deficiencies, which impede the success of peacekeeping. Peacekeeping, I'll ask myself two questions. Has the UN been a success story? And if so, is peacekeeping the best formula for sustainable peace? Well, the answer to the first is the UN has definitely been a success, as rightly brought out by Ambassador Nambiar. It's been on the increase. The UN still exists, and that too in New York. Although the Chinese can provide them space, we can provide, the Japanese can, but they continued to add to the economy of the United States. The next is peacekeeping. There is no other alternative available with the world other than peacekeeping. And although peacekeeping is not a panacea for the world's problems, but is the only viable instrument that we have today for peace to a reasonable degree. I wouldn't say it's the ultimate. There are lots of flaws, not because of peacekeeping, but by people who manage peacekeeping or who do peacekeeping. Now, I'll address the subject from three angles, basically to give you a three-sided view as to what is this business all about. And there are three levels at which it is dealt with. The Security Council, which is the primemost agency, where all decisions are taken and provided for to facilitate peacekeeping. And we have, of course, the mission area where the management is on the ground, and then the contributors, contingents, and the locals, where the whole entire show of peacekeeping takes place. Needless to remind you that peacekeeping is not a subject of debate and symposiums, but is an art of practice on ground, where you deal with people in failed states and states that are in crisis, and classroom discussions do not help. After all, whoever attends most of these seminars are people in uniform or diplomats or scholars. Where are the politicians or the primary decision makers? I never see them in any seminar in any part of the world. Where are the people of the Department of Peacekeeping or the Department of Peace Support, as we call it today? Nowhere. They just follow what scholars have to tell them, and these scholars who have no field experience, who are entirely theoretical in their approach, beautiful English, full of semantics, rhetoric, whatnot. But that's not what peacekeeping is all about. Peacekeeping has to have a thorough application of the mind. To give you an instance and want you to be humble about it, not that I want to show, before I was chosen as the commander, the then chief, General Joshi, without my knowing, had me go to Pune and meet a lady called Mrs. Lam. I didn't know why I was going. She probably knew why I was coming. So I went and met her, and she spoke to me over breakfast for about good 3 hours. And at the end of it, she says, "You know why you're here?" I said, "I don't know." "You know who I am?" I said, "Mrs. Lam." She said, "I'm a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and your chief has sent you to me to analyze whether he has the right guy for this job." I don't know what she liked in me. She did support me. But these are the nuances or the details that you have to go into when you enter the arena of peacekeeping. That's what I want to say. It's just like winning hearts and minds. Easy said than done. It's a very scientific subject, very sensitive, and a lot is applicable to it when you're on ground as to how win people over, how to make them dependent on you. And that provides peacekeeping a success. You can't do peacekeeping alone without the assistance of the people whom you want to help. It is they who matter, their ways, and their country. You are second-class citizens in those lands. They are the first. They come above you for everything. We go gaga over sending a women's police formed unit to Liberia. I laugh at it. Policing is not a single gender subject. Policing has no specific gender. Policing consists of women police and gents police put together. And policing is not what UN is meant for. So it has to be provided with the immunity of the local law, which UN has no jurisdiction over. So all that the UN can do in policing is to provide the assistance and mentoring, and should not take on tasks which are beyond it, like policing states, as they did in Liberia. Fine, traffic control, etc. That's what the women were doing there. And that's not policing. Policing means much more to it. Unfortunately, the UN peacekeeping architectural structure at New York, or rather in member states also, is all dominated by diplomats. People who are bright, no doubt, but they have very limited knowledge of actions on ground, as I just brought out. An example of the police. Well, if you want to do a PR exercise and use that women police unit in Liberia to your advantage as a good PR exercise, certainly you've succeeded. But otherwise, you do need in today's UN, not diplomats alone who dominate it, who are full of excellent terms from the Oxford Dictionary, but you need civilians, military, economists, social scientists, scholars, researchers, all working together under that one roof called the UN Secretariat, and in total harmony with each other, and be able to understand each other. There's a definite need to militarize the civilian mind and civilianize the military mind, so that you get to know how others work, what's their way of life, what lingo do they use. And the military excels in using its glossary of military terms to intimidate civilians or to shut them up when they're not able to explain things. And that's why we lose. That's how we lost on APSPA. AFSPA, APSA is not anti-people, it is pro-people. It is there to assist good people. It's only meant to apprehend people who are terrorists. But the human rights people who have no understanding of it advocate against AFSA, and we cannot sell our products as military men, so we lose out. So you see how much of science is involved, whether you're a military man or a diplomat, and anything that you do. And I would say that countries that are not used to body bags coming home should stay far from the arena of peacekeeping. In New York, I've always heard this language by everyone. It's political. What do you mean it's political? Politics, I thought, was good governance. Politics is not an anti or negative word, but they will say it's political. You got to do political balance of everything. You don't depend on merit, but you choose staff, military and civilian, based on their gender, their geography, from where they come. That's not how you do peacekeeping. It's like in any industry, you choose the best to get the best car out. Now, I would also say that we as a nation are not yet politically, militarily, or diplomatically aggressive within the UN campus or the UN environment. It's my personal observation. Because I used to be invited by many ambassadors to their houses for informal talks to know what's happening in DPKO. Not that I would leak out, but I would also get feedback from them and just discuss it generally. But never did our Indian mission ever invite you. They always felt, oh, the military guy, what does he know? The ambassadors know much more. Certainly you do, but you do not know everything. So that's what I want to say, that we underuse our resources which are available. And therefore when I say we're not aggressive, I don't mean hostile, but there's a need to interact more, to network more. In the UN, it's all about give and take, for winning friends over to your side, to get things in the way you want it, or with your thinking on it. It doesn't happen on its own. And we are so obsessed with the entry into the Security Council that again, I'm surprised. What difference is it going to make if you're not in it? Are you going to be better off as a nation? Or in your peacekeeping, I think you're doing it better without even being in the Security Council. It is going to make no difference whether there are 15 members, 5 permanent, 10 others, or whether there are 23, 18 others and 5 permanent. Permanent will be those 5. And talking formally to one of the major members on the Security Council, which I today quote in confidence, when I asked him about reforms once, and he answered, that ambassador tells me, tell me, have you had a third World War? After the last one, it's been 40 years. Then, when I spoke to him, compared to the first 2 that you had within 20 years. I said, no. He said, then happy failed. So what reform do you go? Well, he had a point when he said that. So it's basically, we are wanting an entry into Security Council for a status, a symbol issue that we will look probably better in the world. But it will make no difference to peacekeeping, let me tell you. The permanent 5 do matter, and what matters is the veto power. That needs to be done away with. That is the reform Security Council needs. The Brahimi report was set up to reform peacekeeping. Too much of publicity given to the Brahimi report, but if you ask me, it's worth nothing. The Brahimi report basically restructured DPK. That was the main thing. They created a department of support. They did give you the emphasis on protection of civilians, and they entitled 25% of the budget to be given before it's passed by the General Assembly. These are the 3 main things they did. But there were no reforms on strategy, doctrine, or peacekeeping, or how the business should be done by the Security Council, or the Department of Peacekeeping, or the member states, or the troop contributors, or the contingents on the ground itself. Now, let's start with the Security Council. It has a military, it's entitled, or I would say in its structure is organic, the Military Staff Council. There is non-existent on the ground. It's debunked totally. So what happens? The Secretary General's report is accepted in the form that it goes to the Security Council because there are no military analysts in the Security Council who got to decide all about peace enforcement and peacekeeping, which is a military art, basically. So what happens? The military advisor, like I was there, whatever we say is God's words. to the Security Council. And it's not God's word because they do a lot of informal discussions with us before they accept the report which comes to them from the Secretary General. It is what they want to hear that is put up to them. Whereas I always feel the Secretary General's report should be independent of what Security Council wants to hear so that they arrive at the right objective decision making and not toe each other's line. The other is, nowhere in the world is the military ever composed by numbers. 2,000, 20,000, 30,000, 15,000. That's only applicable to military observers, individuals. The military is always identified by units, subunits, and formations. You say 20 brigades, 10 brigades, 5 brigades, 15 battalions, etc. Because they all have a meaning, inbuilt meaning. When you say a unit, it means everything that a unit has from operations to support is part of that structure. I'm not saying 2,200 and 500, 22,500 military in Congo. It has no meaning. You have to bisector, to dissect a battalion. You can't say, okay, it has 4 companies, we'll take 3.5, not 4. It's not done that way. This is where I say the diplomats have no understanding of the military. You cannot become a military man without wearing a uniform. It's only once you wear a uniform you understand what the military is all about. Having spent 38 years in the army and 14 with the UN, I still don't understand the military myself. So how can others? It's so vast and complex an establishment that in the entire, even a CDS will not understand the entire military, therefore it talks to theater of mastery. They're not an American army. For that, they need theaters. Anyway, that's my personal view. Now, coming down to the mandate. A lot of fault finding is done with the mandate. Everybody puts the blame on the mandate of the Security Council. In my opinion, there is nothing wrong with the Security Council mandate ever. There was nothing wrong ever, neither is there going to be any problem with it. Rather, it has become faulty now. A military mandate given by the a mandate given by the Security Council is an operational directive. It should be simple and broad-based, and not an operational order. Operational order is where tasking is done. It can go from 10 to 30 to 40 tasks, depending on the ground situation. And that is done by the post commander and the mission head, the mission aim. What was mandate in Somalia? Very simple 3 sentences. Maintain a secure environment, to facilitate a political process, assist in the delivery of humanitarian aid. So what does it mean? When we say maintain a secure environment, it means protection of everyone. Be it civilians, be it military, be it UN, non-UN, NGOs, aged, widows, children, everybody comes into that protective environment. Provided you want to do that also. You want to question it, well then there's nothing that the mandate gave us. The other was assist in the delivery of security, humanitarian aid. It means facilitate everything that the NGOs or the aid agencies do to enable them to do their job. And rather, I found them okay in adopting them because they had the goodies while we had the force. We had the reach, they don't. They only go to areas where roads can take roads. We could reach the whole of Somalia, 176,000 square kilometers, the biggest ever held, which means Punjab, Rajasthan, Haryana, Kashmir put together. We could go anywhere. So we got to work together and not saying what do they do, what do I do, we cannot do because we are not mandated. Why should we take the refugees or IDPs home? If you bring the refugees and IDPs home, you are assisting the security state, bringing about stability. So there's a lot that the mandate gives you by way of simplicity and 3 simple statements. Assist the political process. Then automatically it next time come to the rules and use of force. Too much debate on it. Chapter 6, 7, 8. The chapters are self-sufficient, self-explanatory. Coercive use, non-coercive. Chapter 6 or 7. Where is 6.5, etc. all come up? The Chinese chapters and whatnot we say. Not required. You either use force or you don't use. There's no halfway in using force. There are no shades to the use of force. But there's a thing called fire control, which is part of military training. Therefore, all these things that they're talking of the future of getting peacekeeping on contract will never give you any gains or benefits because there is no kind of training that the military provides to its people before they become blue helmets. Rather, it's part of our, not all, I would even say not all nations are suited for peacekeeping. It's only nations like ours where we do a lot of community job or aid to civil authority that we are trained for such jobs which peacekeeping missions demand. You're dealing with people in crisis, as I said, states in crisis. That means you got to be able to know the dynamics of the kind of aid that you have to provide. Next slide.
Please conclude, Mono.
Yes, sir. Just sum it up. Finally, the intervention brigade in Monok. Again, I find it ridiculous. With all the efforts you had in NATO and Yugoslavia, they couldn't do much. With all the Delta force that we had in Somalia, they couldn't do much. And what has the intervention brigade done in Congo? Nothing. They don't need such fighting forces to fight the militants or rebels who are 1/30th or 1/40th time less than you in capability. They are absolutely different people. They get the gun for the survival. They don't have the kind of discipline, training, grooming, nourishment which you have as peacekeepers. And mind you, the UN system and logistics is the best I've ever seen in the world. Nobody can provide you that kind of logistics, communications, transport, medical, office equipment, communications, technical skills which are needed, technology, which the UN provides. So what more do you want? The UN is not short on resources or funds. It is mismanagement. It is lack of knowledge. It has enough. It can do anything for you, provided you want to do it. And member states have to understand you've got to enable peacekeeping to succeed and then seek a seat in the Security Council. I'm surprised why we only give not more than a brigade to the world for peacekeeping, whereas Pakistan and Bangladesh can give up to 2. They are as much a hostile enemy to them as they are to us. If they can give 2 brigades, why can't Indians? Are we so short on our resources? Is our army so small? We have enough capacity to facilitate peacekeeping to the best it can, provided we understand what it is. And finally, the last thing I would say, it's high time that the world thinks of preventive deployment for the future. It's much more cost effective in terms of you have less casualties, you have less expenses, and you're there, having taken the first bus to the mission area rather than taking the last bus. So it takes you 6 months or more to put blue helmets, boots on ground. And preventive deployment will be preventive of a situation going beyond your control, and then you're trying to restore it. So obviously you'll suffer casualties because military means casualties. Military means blood on either sides, of course, more on the opposing side. But if you want to avoid all that and make peacekeeping a good story to write about, indulge in preventive deployment, take Macedonia. Part of 1 Pro 4. It was a success story. And that is the answer for the future, the billboard for the future. With that, I learned that it is not the UN that has let the people of the world down, it's we who have not stood by the UN. And as Rajiv Gandhi in 1986, one of our prime ministers then, said that protection of people is too harmful a subject to give to those who have the monopoly of power. They have the monopoly of power to destroy the world, but not the monopoly of wisdom to save the world. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mono, for that presentation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're already for half an hour over the schedule. I request the speakers to please, I mean, I don't want to ring the bell and throw the class at you or something like that, but please try to say. We have Colonel Dr. Pillai to speak to us on the Korean experience 7 decades on. Colonel Pillai, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the honor, sir. Thank you. This is a privilege for me to be addressing on a subject which very few people are probably aware of or remember in our country. It's one of the most successful missions that the United Nations can put up, and India has a great role to play in this. Can you upload my presentation? So India has a great role to play in one of the greatest, one of the most successful stories. Though the Korean saga has never come to an end, but India had played at all the levels, at the political level, at the, please make it in slide view. So India played the political, like what PG also had mentioned, and Garrett mentioned, and you also mentioned, sir, about the importance of the whole of government approach. This was one mission in which the entire country had put its weight behind, especially because it was its first mission after becoming independent. So I will be talking about the elements that play in the slide view. And that slide view of notes will be. Just make it in the slide view. The notes page is coming. So let me just quickly take you through what Korea was. Korea was a colony of Japan, and it was annexed in 1910. Even before that, the major occupation did actually was a protectorate. And during the World War World War II, they actually the 30th parallel was drawn as a boundary between the Russian forces and the Americans, where the Russians were supposed to. The 30th parallel remained very much the border between North and South Korea. And after the war was over, Korea was the North Korean side was not recognized. King Ulja, the grandfather of the present dictator, was the one who controlled, and the South Koreans, which was run by the Americans, were recognized by the United Nations and the rest of the world. And there was a democratically elected government. Syngman Rhee was the premier, who was actually an American citizen. And he was apparently worked for the CIA before he became the prime minister. And so there was still kind of an aggression between the trying to unify both the territories, the north and the south. And yeah, thank you. So the Chinese had backed the North Korean side, and there was the South Korean side was the UN command, and the Americans had provided a lot of support to them until the invasion took place, because the Secretary of State for Defense in America in 1950 declared that the American axis of influence extended from Philippines to Japan across the sea. They failed to mention Korea, and that Chinese took it as a signal that Korea belonged to them, and they invaded over the entire Korean peninsula. And if you see the slide that the white boundary in the bottom half, that's Busan provinces where the South Koreans were driven to. And then, of course, MacArthur's great invasion on Incheon, the landings of Incheon took place, and that's when the world, the United Nations. The United Nations convened an emergency session, which called for the resolution number 82 and 83 was passed, which allowed for the use of force. And if this is the reason why article, resolution number 377 has also come in, where when a veto country actually defies the P5 and they abdicate their responsibility, is 377 the Unite for Peace resolution, which has met 10 times, in which one of the times that they met is for Israeli-Palestinian cause. And so this is something. So this resolution asked for United Nations member countries to provide for troops, and India's cabinet immediately met, and they decided that we must contribute, and also to increase the model force of the United Nations. We were one of the founding members, like what Ambassador Nambiar mentioned, 24th of October 1945, it was created. We were signatories, and India recognized that the invasion took place by the North Korean side. And whatever decision had to be done, or whatever action had to be done, had to be restricted to the peninsula. It couldn't go beyond, neither could it link to any other issues. And this was India's first mission, and there's a lot of pride in the manner in which the entire, in fact, the manner in which they were sent off. The Prime Minister had personally met each member of the team, and the finest officers had been picked up. Next slide. Next slide. So there were three distinct components in the Korean War. Until date, it remains one of the largest, longest lasting components. That is the first one of the parachute field regiment, which is a flying, which is an airborne medical unit. You must have recalled seeing those MASH series that used to come in the 80s and Star News. So these people, and they provide yeoman service in the sense they were given the best equipment, which was not available, and they were landed there once the invasion took place. And just remember, they landed in this, and there was some kind of a hostility from Simonry, who refused to allow them to land, so they were flown into this, and they part of the Operation Tomahawk and all other operations, airborne operations, flying alongside the 8th Airborne and 82nd Airborne and everyone. And they carried out many operations. They were called angels. They were really they were paratroopers. In fact, Colonel Ranganathan is the first paratrooper in the Indian Army. He was the first paratrooper, a medical person who actually, and he earned an MBC for the kind of service. And this unit is one of the most decorated regiment sub-units in the Indian Army today. It had carried out advances, and there's a very interesting anecdote which needs to be mentioned here. In fact, when they landed there, they were asked to withdraw immediately to Seoul, and they were there because the invasion had taken place. And the medical unit was dependent on the division on which they were all panicking because the Chinese had invaded about 80,000 troops had invaded. There was no way they could actually muster, and they could abandon everything, and manpower was supposed to say. Then Colonel Ranganathan said that there is nothing, we are useless without the equipment that will come. And this was all specially purchased equipment which was provided, and there's no point in leaving it. And they scouted around, they found a train which was abandoned. And then in Ranganathan's medical platoon, there was two people who were steam engine drivers in those days before they joined the army. They got this engine running. And in fact, not only the medical platoon, not only the 60th field ambulance, they evacuated everyone else, and then just as they evacuated, ambulance was evacuated, and because of that, they continued to serve, and they ended up 3 years providing great service to the war that took place between the North Koreans. And these are some pictures. This is a picture of the meeting them and sending them off. And Sardar Baldev Singh was the defense minister who actually was there on the ship, and then he flew on in the cold and the weather, all kinds of inclement weather, and that's very fast. So, I'll just quickly skip this, and in fact, it's a very interesting letter from Lady Edwina living in Prime Minister's house, visited the troops there. And this is the story. Anyway, to come to the thing, the most important part was there was an armistice agreement which came about 27th of July, under which the resolution again by proposal by India taken the lead there, and they asked for the creation of a neutral nations repatriation committee, and India was the chair for this. And these are the various organizations that were meant to create. And the neutral nations repatriation committee was chaired by General Himaya, one of the most distinguished army generals that we've had, and it had 2 nations from the Western Bloc and 2 from the Eastern Bloc. And because of India's neutrality, it was accepted very well. And in fact, General Himaya, along with this, and to protect the issue was about repatriation of those prisoners that were held by either side, the CPV and the UN Army. And India provided again one of the finest generals, one of the finest chiefs we never had, General Thorat, who, along with a complement of 6,000 men who they provided, and they were very violent and unruly bunch of prisoners. In fact, in one of the cases, he was actually detained. And in the early instance, when the American general was detained, they opened fire and killed a couple of them. But here, General Thorat immediately disarmed them by asking that you've been my prisoner till now. Now I'm your prisoner. So you might as well look after me and give me a cup of tea in secret. And he sat down there, and then it was diffused. And thereafter, they had a very good relationship with them. And he created, and this custodian force did a great job in restoring the honor of our country. And the thing was not restoring, the logo said for honor of India. This is the logo that they had, and they didn't really live up to the. And as a result of that intervention, they actually repatriated a large number of people. In fact, some of them even came to India. There were some people who didn't want to go to either side. And then 70 years later, we just have a memorial that has been set up in Delhi cantonment, where there's a park, and people know that it played a great role in the past in creating and in steering resolutions, and it has always done so. And what it needs is to build on our goodwill that we have in these countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Padma, for that presentation on the Korean experience. I think it started off our whole involvement with UN peace operations. Well, the next speaker is, I think, joining us from Chandigarh, General J.S. Lida, who again has been a distinguished soldier, and the UN environment is, I think, well respected for his performance in as the force commander in Sudan, and later on in many capacities with the United Nations. And he will speak to us on one of the very important aspects of that is associated with peacekeeping today. That is technology as a force multiplier in contemporary UN peacekeeping operations. Over to you. It's a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning, and Jai Hind. Firstly, do confirm that you can all hear me well and clear. Then I'll proceed. Is it okay? Thank you very much. Well, firstly, let me state what an honor it is to share the sessions today with such luminaries of the UN, especially General Lambia, whom I'm mortally scared. He happens to somehow just be the marshal in every panel, and I will ensure, sir, I stick to my given 10 minutes. What has happened in the recent past are two things. There has been a fundamental shift in the environment in which the UN operates. It has become more violence prone. It has become more riddled with whole lot of cyber threats, which was not there. And what has happened is, because of that, there has been a paradigm shift in UN peace operations. And the shift is so rapid that people who have left the UN some time back find it difficult to understand. In the senior mission leadership courses that we run, I find people who were away for a short while also are overtaken by events, because a mission like Mali, it changes so rapidly every second or third mile. So when I come to adaptability, please understand, you must keep in touch. What is the UN today? What is the result? The result is, firstly, your mandates are very demanding today. They are under Chapter 7. They expect you to carry out proactive, robust operations. In fact, in places like Force Intervention Brigade, people have been tasked even to carry out offensive operations. Now, that is the reality of the UN. A lot of us keep debating, is the UN fighting a war to establish peace? That's a different question altogether. But I'm going to stick to what the UN is and how does it impact you. Number two is the concept of operations has gone very heavy, very robust, with a heavy protection of civilian responsibility. And this POC often is becoming critical to what I'm going to speak on the technology. Now, technology, in particular digital innovations, is becoming pivotal to effective peacekeeping. We ourselves find how technology is just intruded into everything that we do, and yet it comes with its own baggage. Technology, I want to caution everybody, is a force multiplier. That's what I call it. It multiplies human skills. It can never and should never be allowed to replace human decision making with a people-centric approach. That is often where we go wrong, and then we find Afghanistan, Iraq, and we'll see another Afghanistan after 5 years, because a lot of us suddenly have gone digital, and even use terms like digital peacekeeper. I just get dread on these words because what we require today in the conflict environment is a robust peacekeeper with the boots on the ground, the guy who's supposed to move out and actually intervene when the situation comes. The new strategy for digital transformation of UN peacekeeping has just been released a few days back. I'm not going to go into details, but there are few salient features of it. It is based on 4 goals. Drive innovation, maximize potential of current and new technologies, understand threats to safety and security of peacekeepers, and mandate implementation with ensuring a protection role. The main actually motivator for technology to come in has been the safety and security of peacekeepers. Increasingly, as people started taking attrition, a lot of people were pulling back and deploying. So safety and security is actually the heart of the modern technology, which is now coming into the UN peace operations. The emphasis is on 2 things. Firstly, a very deliberate and systemic approach to the digital transformation in the field. And number 2, need for multidimensional driven processes, transparent, non-intrusive application with data confidential protection privacy. Moment you talk about technology and peacekeeping on the field, there is a huge pullback from the host nation, the host responsibility in those areas. And that is becoming an issue. And that is what we're going to have. The first thing you must do is engage the host nation on this digital transformation. Because a lot of host nations find this intrusive into their culture, into their sovereignty. And I had a tough time in South Sudan. President Salva Kiir, even till today, has not allowed drones to fly in. And back home, when we do see how technology is coming in and how various applications are intruding into our private space, you can well understand when you land up with these drones and high satellite images into a conflict zone, an area which is actually very embedded in its cultural identity, ethnic pride, how they view it. So the government, the mission has to interact with the whole of government approach and communities. We've been trying to do that. Try and get a technological awareness into that area. And second, what is important is you should only induct that technology which can be absorbed in that area. Absorbed in 2 ways. One, the infrastructure, and number 2, the human skills. We got German state-of-the-art generators in South Sudan floating, which were totally out of touch with the environment that were there, and 2 of them packed up with the type of weather it was. It took us 6 months to get their spares and a German engineer to repair it. While the Indian generators, which we just pushed from Sudan and with their jugaad, were much more successful. So please remember, you cannot go in for a quantum technological jump. Those conflict zones are just not prepared for it. So some of these huge diagrams that we learn of digital war zones and all that, that's just not going to succeed on the ground. Number 2, what is technology really supposed to do? It should leverage leadership skills in 4 things: understanding, deciding, monitoring, and adapting. Adapting is one quality now which has superseded all the other qualities, because unless you constantly monitor the changes in the conflict, changes in the peace processes, changes in the humanitarian areas, you will be sticking to your old formats, mindseted approach, and not getting the correct solution. So we need adaptability to technology, even in the technology. Number 2, you have to mainstream the technology in all mission planning concepts and strategies. It must form part so that everybody is in the same grid. Otherwise, you find a troop contributing countries on a different grid, another one on a different grid. Situational awareness lies at the heart of peacekeeping today. What is situational awareness? It's actually putting an all-weather day and night surveillance grid, which includes a whole lot of things: satellite images, aerial observation, helicopters, UAVs, and surface sensors. I'm not going to talk much about it, except to say that all this information is of no use if it is not converted into actionable intelligence through the joint structures that we have put up, the JOC and the JMAC, and the decision of the leader to rise above this technology, filter technological inputs, and take the right decision. Otherwise, you will see what the Americans did on their departure, the gift they gave with the drone, the so-called the revenge of the suicide attack that took place at the Kabul airport. And this is the scare today. and the Western units try and sell this idea of technology contributing countries, you need to pull back. In Mali, the idea of TCCs, technology contributing countries, has been a huge, I would say a failure, but a huge issue now, because people are talking about two missions within a mission, or they are talking about a mission being protected by another mission. So units which come in, they must be tailor-made and they must have their own technology. If you are going to give them technological support, please ensure that the units who come in are embedded into them in their command and control structure, or they get embedded into that same protection zone. You cannot have high-flown PCCs coming in, provide your technology separately, living separate, A, who are asking for protection to protect themselves, and number two, are very sensitive on selecting and feeding information to you, which otherwise you want. Use of force. The use of force is two things. It hasn't changed one bit since warfare began. Deployment and employment. We need tailor-made task forces with technological support, and this technology must be interoperable. That's fundamental. Employment, pivots and maneuver. Nothing has changed ever since the bow and arrow show. Pivots have come under attack. The UN has been attacked, both standoff attack and physical attacks. And in that fear, we have now gone in for huge technological jump to safeguard those bases. I always caution people that technology is there to assist you in the safety and precaution. It does not replace your physical domination outside that post. Your defense of the post lies outside and not inside. You can put yourself in Mali and elsewhere with a whole lot of cameras and a whole lot of walls and a whole lot of technology. But if you do not move out and reduce that threat from outside, there's going to be a huge problem. This technology is also brought in everywhere. The army is over. People now have got gadgets to monitor everything on the ground, on the mobile. So why should he move? If a guy is sitting on a chair monitoring everything. So this digital warfare or digital peacekeeping, it is required very much, yes. But I want to put a caution here. Please do not overdo. Do not get enslaved by technology. That's going to be a huge area. Protection of civilians is fundamental on threat analysis. I will just leave the last word. I'm not going to take more time about is the cyber security. Now, this technology itself has got weaponized. So now, whether it's social media, whether it is cyber, the threats have increased manifold into the peacekeepers, and all of them there. They are on Twitter, they are on social media. And how do you know? A lot of them are seeing fake videos. They are seeing fake things. Against this, UN still is struggling to evolve the realities, because then we allow Twitters and then we argue somebody, things like that and all. This is one area which needs, and I leave you with the last thought again. Please, please use the technology. It is there for you and you must use it, but it is a force multiplier. It should never, never throw up comfort-bound theorists who are oblivious to the physical dangers. Otherwise, you will have many Afghanistans coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm in charge of, directly in charge of the oversight of peacekeeping operations at Army headquarters today. General Fernandez to speak to us on, or give us an assessment of India's missions and its impact on in the countries of employment. Over to you, Michael.
ADSA. Okay. Respected Director General, General Satish respected, very distinguished fellow panelists, all our seniors and mentors, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, thank you for inviting us here today, serving officers. In particular, I also like to thank my dear friend and colleague, hostmate, Colonel DPK Philip from Indian Days for extending this personal invite. It's a great honor for me, firstly, and my team to be over here to share our thoughts on a contemporary subject that all of us here, at least in this audience and listening on the webinar, are very close to our hearts. I think over the years and over the decades of peacekeeping, or ever since its inception, the UN, even today, as heard from the previous speakers, and I'm sure those who will follow, of nations enjoying its mandate in assuring peace and stability in troubled hotspots around the world. And as we look at it, peacekeeping the way it worked in looking at ceasefire, looking at decolonization efforts, etc., evolved into something more robust and complex into peace enforcement, nation building, and what have you, underscoring the complexity that we face today in the world's turbulence that we see in the world. In all this, India has long championed the cause of Indian peacekeeping, UN peacekeeping around the world, as we know. And the proven competence and the capability of our UN soldiers in Indian uniform, wearing the UN blue beret, have seen ever since they till now. Our need and our resolve to be counted at the UN high order, whether officially or not, but visibly respected. And in doing so, as the world's premier military and economic power, the world of the solution. Our proven competence underscored by a lot of sacrifice, and we are resolved even stronger to be recounted and continue to be counted in ensuring that we are responsible, adding to the UN cause and ensuring stability and peace in the places that we are mandated to do so. Having said that, given the limited time that I have, I'd like to quickly assure you a brief snapshot into what we're doing and what we aim to do to allay some of the concerns of our senior officers who have been in very exalted positions in the UN and those that will follow in due course. Can we have the next step? It's not working. Next slide, please. That's how I'd like to cover my presentation. Just a snapshot, factual, since my mandate is what's happening today and the impact. Where are we deployed today in the world? What are the trends? I'll gloss over this because it's been covered by the panelists and known by everybody in this distinguished audience. I'll look, of course, at our assessment and what impact and some insights into how we're charting our way ahead, sir. So next. Next, please. So this is what we have. We have 71 years, 7 decades of UN peacekeeping. We participated in 51 out of the 71 missions. 258,000 troops contributed. A number of force commanders, some of them distinguished, sitting over here. 2 wave commanders, 2 military advisors, 15 malads, 8 deputy force commanders. 159% made the supreme sacrifice here. Captain Salaria, our PVC, 5 MVCs, and the rest of the awards. And I'd like over here, since Satish himself is over here, I drew the quote to let us all know what he and all of us think of our UN peacekeepers, the Indian peacekeepers wearing the and I quote, India's spontaneous and unreserved participation in UN peacekeeping operations over the years has been a clear demonstration of the country's commitment to the objectives set out in the UN Charter, not in terms of rhetoric and symbolism, but in real and practical terms, even to the extent of accepting casualties to a person. This is what our force commander had mentioned, who's sitting amongst us. Please. So where are we deployed today? Today we are deployed in 8 missions around the globe, and in 4 of these missions we have major contribution. And these countries are as follows. In Lebanon, we have an infantry battalion and small elements. In Monaco, we have the infantry brigade with 3 battalions down to 2 now that constitute the brigade group. We also have level 3 hospital. In South Sudan, we've got 2 infantry battalions and we got 2 level 2 hospitals and allied elements. And we have the force logistic company that is supporting the entire effort in Undorf in the Golan Heights. Besides this, we've got a presence in the form of staff officers and military observers in Cyprus, the Middle East, and also Western Sahara, and in Abdi, a small country sandwiched between Sudan and South Sudan. A total of 5,405 peacekeepers of various states
that represent our country abroad today. Next, please. The trend in peacekeeping, this is something I just glossed over. As you know, the complexity that we are facing today, Indian peacekeepers and peacekeepers around the world, but where we have evolved from interstate to intrastate, from chapter 6 to chapter 7, traditional missions to multi-dimensional missions, the complexities of which are still evolving and all under budgetary constraints. A brief word on each. Next. This is how the UN had started from an improvised kind of a role overseeing decolonization, post the Cold War, etc. UNSO was in that humble effort that started. The United Nations emergency effort in the Middle East was something that went along that line of looking at ceasefire, ushering in stability. UNIFIL was a traditional mission looking at the safe withdrawal of the Israelis across the blue line. From there, we've gone on to armed groups, ethnic violence, protection of civilians that have been articulated by the speakers before me in complex missions like Sierra Leone, Central African Republic, and every as we speak, just still evolving missions at the moment. Next, please. Chapter 6 was traditional, looking at the 3 principles of consent, non-use of force, impartiality. Today we got to chapter 7. Now the pioneering effort was here by General Satish Nambiar himself, UNPROFOR in Yugoslavia, the mission in Somalia. I wouldn't say it's failed to ensure the mandate. Probably the mission was so dynamic. It was very difficult to do something to achieve what it set out to do. Despite grave odds, it did a lot and limited resources. And thereafter, of course, we have the Brimey report that did something added to the value of robust peacekeeping that came out in 2000 and finally went to the capstone document that has kind of redefined or shaped how we make peace enforcement missions and nation building efforts under the Chapter 7 mandate. Next. Increasing complexity, this busy slide, all that I'd like to show you is in the center that from traditional, we've gone on to things like human rights, disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, something we call now as DDR and taking it as a given, electoral assistance, mine action, and supporting effort like humanitarian assistance and socio-economic recovery. All under the, please go next. Please go next. Go back to the budgetary thing if you don't mind, you skip to, here. And all this would suggest that we require larger budgets, but unfortunately the inverse is happening. And we got smaller constrained budgets. And have a look at what we're doing. We got the budget of $8.4 billion in 2015 has reduced down to now 6.4 billion. The troop contribution has gone down from 1 lakh to 77,000. And if you take a look at the purple line of India or the dark blue line, if it is visible, meters for you, you have the troops down from 7798 to 5405 now. We are still the third largest troop. So this is how Indian peacekeepers are operating around the world. We have got intransigent host nations, neutral at times hostile. We've got groups in various shades of ethnic and religious profiling, fragmented among themselves, mandated to protect the civil population with limited resources, militarily at times affected by the budget, and all under the international media. This is where we are all operating in hotspots, particularly the African continent. This is what we're looking at in terms of stabilization of the security situation. We had looked at stabilization of armed groups, targeted offensive operations, security line of communication, and support the government forces, all under certain guiding principles that we are strong in, include neutrality and political vision. Next. Targeted offensive, this happened in Beni and Goma in 2013, Beni in 2019, wherein violent actions took place. Indians also part of that, and through great difficulty, we managed to safeguard the UN assets, protect civilians who are not part of the conflict zone, and apart from the several security static duties that were carried out as shown in terms of vehicle area domination patrols and things like this. Next. Security line of communication, on an average today, 3 to 4 escort duties per day, translating to 350 to 400 escort duties in a month. Road opening, it's largely area domination of about 390 kilometers of road in MINUSMA, in MONUSCO, in Congo, from the 3 arteries that are emanating out of Goma. Next. Support to government forces, not too much of training as of now. It had its place in 2016-17 to the government forces in Congo. Today, we're in logistic support, some amount of transportation of rations, some amount of provision of UN containers to the government forces, and closer integration between the government and the UN, both in Congo and Sudan. Next. This is where I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes. Nation building, humanitarian assistance, DDR, infrastructure, and protection of civilians. Go next. The humanitarian assistance today we are looking at support to NGOs in Congo. 667 escort missions is what we're doing today. A small word on disaster relief. I think we are hooked up with my brigade commander in Congo, who will also speak shortly on this. But since I'm here and the well is already there, so I'll probably steal his thunder a bit in terms of the combined time that we have. This was a very important thing that took place and showcased us in a great manner. On 22nd of May, the active volcano Nyiragongo erupted. It was last erupted in 2003, created havoc in Goma town. And in this, we managed to ensure the safety of 3,000 civilians, the safe temporary evacuation to and fro Goma of 5,000 civilians, and protected all our UN assets that were vacated by others in the vicinity of the helipad at Goma town. In medical relief, go back please. In medical relief, I'm happy to tell you that we were the first troop contingent in the world over to have 100% vaccinated our troops who were deployed all across the globe. In addition to that, 100% of our troops are vaccinated as we're going for the missions. In addition to that, today we've got medical camps all over. We've established 19 veterinary camps, particularly in South Sudan, for cattle protection and so on and so forth. And we were primarily at the forefront of protecting the locals in Ebola outbreak that you might have read that took place in 2019, and we prevented that pandemic from spreading. This is something important in the DDR. I'll just spend a few seconds only on this. We've largely assured this nation building to an extent by facilitating the disarmament of 20 of the armed groups, resulting in a total of surrender of 1,000 armed group personnel and 220 child soldiers. Next. Infrastructure, largely with our HMEC company that is there in South Sudan, construction of roads and helipads. We have now just completed an important project, that is the White Nile Jetty project in Malakal, and we have restored a defunct, almost a dead helipad at Malakal to operational efficiency. We also engaged, as would be visibly, quick impact projects all over, some of them seen and shown in front of you, the Mahatma Gandhi Park, the Sardar Patel Stadium, etc., in keeping with our efforts to integrate the local population with us in a combined nation. Have restarted, and the last year we have managed to rehabilitate 5,500 displaced persons. Next. Recognition is something with all of y'all. We have, of course, assured in transition from volatile to stable missions. We have been recognized for our professionalism, and as we would be happy to know that last week, our battalion that is there in Lebanon has typically won the unit citation. Today has been about a WhatsApp message saying that our logistic company, sir, in Undor has also got the force commander's unit citation. The lady that we see was the first Indian peacekeeper who was awarded the Gender Advocate Award, a very prestigious award in UN parlance. And we are well on that way to assuring gender parity and recognition in our own way. This is the last slide of impact that I'd like to leave with you to give a heart to seniors who have gone before us, that we are well on our way to ensuring that we continue this effort in a bigger way. We are looking at increased troop contribution in the Central African Republic, where we have battalion. We're looking to pledge troops in Appraisal. Presently, we only have staff officers and myself there, sir. We are looking at pledging rapidly deployment battalions, action companies, and enabling units like the engineers and the military hospitals in these missions. We are also looking to keep logistic capabilities at hand to be deployed at short notice in the form of bricks to be kept ready at hand. Today in military diplomacy, we're looking at triangular partnership with African troop contributing countries. We're talking to friendly troop contributing countries like Vietnam, and as we speak, we're about to have this hospital military to military medical integration in South Sudan. And we have already started deploying troops in missions. Kazakhs have deployed with us a platoon worth for 4 missions in Lebanon, and continuing that effort, we're looking at other countries who are aligned to our cause. And last but not least, we have the Center of Human Peacekeeping that is over here. In fact, I was part of the first UNMOSOC course under the chairmanship of General Satish Nambiar, which was here in the USA, sir. UNMOSOC 1 in 2001. And from there, we've come a long way. We're still evolving in trying to ensure that we grow to be a global kind of a center of excellence in our own right by enhancing our research capability and facility, digiting our archives, ensuring that our training is in contemporary with the best in the world. Next. In conclusion, I'd just like to reiterate that we continue to champion our cause for on inclusiveness in UN peacekeeping. We would like to enhance our vision to the world community by our own visible troop manifestation that we have demonstrated. Our proven capability and success have gone before us, and we will continue to ensure that we will work proactively under the UN flag in ensuring peace and stability and troubled hotspots around the world. Thank you, sir, for that little extra time that you gave me.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that very comprehensive and interesting presentation. Now, we next have hands-on sort of experience being given to us by someone who's been a sector commander in South Sudan. in regard to the Chapter 7 implications of the use of force. General Brar will speak to us on this subject.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wait for the presentations.
We don't have an armored brigade deployed anywhere. No? You know. Entitlement has been there for me.
There's enough use of mech by me's. The JSA General Nambias, Master Chinmay, and distinguished guests. Firstly, I'd like to thank the DG and the IDSA, and of course, my contact Colonel Pillai, for giving me this opportunity to share my experience in South Sudan, where I was a sector commander in 2016-17, and then I was doubling up as a national senior also. So this practical experiences. So I will, tell everything what happened on ground. There's no theory, and there are a lot of slides. So if I overshoot, but I am sure you'll find everything very interesting. And it will also help in all of you research scholars in connecting what the seniors and the distinguished speakers before me have spoken. So next slide. Next, everybody is aware of the mission, but South Sudan is a big country in Central Africa and the equator. Next slide. Conflict summary, this was a new country which was established in 2011 after General Ritter, who was the post commander in Sudan. So I will just not go into details, but this country is besieged by tribal wars, cattle raids, power struggle, apart from what the UN mission is doing, and resource control, which is global power, which was also mentioned by, I think, Ambassador Nambiar. The global powers don't put their troops in line of fire. What they do is they are taking important positions in the mission, and of course they are using money power. So I'm not going to detail that point. But South Sudan is something which is very unique. Their cattle grades, cow is the currency, and the three more tribes which are there: the Dinka, Nuer, and the Murles. So basically, Dinkas aligned to the government, Nuers were the rebels, and Murles were the fighter lot. And in fact, all of them are more than 6 feet tall. Next. So briefly, the conflict, 11 July, July 2011, the South Sudan gained independence. Salva Kiir became the president. He was a Dinka. Riek Machar was the vice president. But 2013, he was accused, Machar was accused of plotting a coup, so he ran away. So 13 to 16, war happened. 16, they tried to reinitiate peace, but then 2 months again, fighting broke out. It was a Juba crisis, in which the force commander from Kenya was removed and all the people from Kenya were also told to vote. In fact, it's slightly ironical. The decision to bring them together was not military, but the force commander was told to go away. And in this, there were casualties to the Chinese. Their BMP was hit by a rocket launcher and 2 of them died. I will cover that subsequently. And fighting continued, and this was around the time I was there. Next. This is just to explain, when I come to other things, there are no roads in that country, and the roads that you see are what you see on the slide. And of course, my sector had the White Nile, so there were the boats of the Bangladeshis, and airstrips are the lifeline in that area. Next. A mandate, briefly, protection of civilians has been talked about. A huge mandate considering the size of the country and human rights, create conditions for delivery of humanitarian. So this is a huge mandate. And as General Monogoran said, this is a task if you want to do it. So I think I did try to do it. Next. The TCCs, India was the largest, as you see in top. And if you see the fighting units, which is in the first column, it's all from Asia and none from Europe and other places. China had that 1 battalion, which of course was in Juma, which was considered to be safe, but of course they had their casualties. Next. I was also doing national senior, so anybody deployed anywhere in the country was my responsibility, especially the first four points: guidance, discipline, and operational issues. So becoming, I was the whole country was divided into 4 parts. I was sector commander east. This is the hierarchy which was their force commander was from Rwanda, 3-star, deputy force Mongolia. Before them he was from China.
and balance of the sector commanders. This meeting was held in Juba, so that's why you have Chinese major and the CO on the either side, and the sector commander for China you can see. The chief of staff UK, who you see here, was again removed because he was considered unprofessional. Next. Sector East is about 300. My sector had battalions from all the countries, which are listed there. And of course, I had to rely on the Indian battalion the maximum. Rest, of course, we pulled along, but they did a good job considering. Next. Sector East, I'll just go over all the operational challenges. One was the fighting which was taking place, government forces. Then Chala areas in Ethiopia, there were cattle range across, so I had to manage that area. Pebor is, there's something called age-set clashes which was happening. And there's a Dinka Morle, very violent clashes. You know, when they come, they kill. And I mean, you will see some photos which I'll show you. And Bo Juba, there were criminal activities. So I'll just go over them one by one. Next. See, everything is by air. So what I thought was the only way to reach out, because people sitting in Juba used to make assessment, as the letter also said, which had no relevance to the things that were happening on ground. Next. So what I started doing was, I went in fact on each patrol in the beginning, and then I found that it was a very good way of developing a good connect. Next. So every patrol I went, and slowly, you know, won the confidence of the people. As also mentioned, it is not the troops which matter. And you know, just on a lighter way, since I was reasonably tall, because all of them are 6+, and since I'm wearing a turban, so they said which tribe? I said there's a very particular tribe in India called Khalsa tribe. Next. So every time these tribal clashes used to take place, I used to make them gather and try and explain and this thing. So I think I was able to influence, because if one tribe attacks, the other is preparing for the attack. So I used to explain to them, and actually one realizes they have very poor leadership. I mean, those people actually are very simple. They may be very ferocious looking, but if you get to know them, they are good at heart, and if you win their confidence, then you know you can really do good for them. Next. So this key leadership engagement, of course, the government forces, as I said, or Dinka, I'm not going into detail. So you have to please them also, but they were the ones who were actually sorting out the news. Next. And these were the people in the field, and you can see all of them. I was a brigadier, but I've met all lieutenant generals there. And again, on a lighter vein, they said the rank is related to how many people you have killed. So I mean, that's. But my going there, my operational assessment, the SRIG started relying on my, because firstly, Indians were deployed, and my sector was where the fighting was taking place. Rest of the area was peace on the western side. And all humanitarian aid assistance I could assist, because I could tell them exactly where to go and what to do. And being neutral is something which improved it. And on this protection, of course, we were guarding. We had in our bases guarding, and future assessment also I could give. Next. So, you know, this is just one slide from one of my briefings. I could exactly say who's where. And since I've gone to all these places and give them a peer assessment, and also that what is happening, because the government in Juba used to tell the UN that we are doing no fighting, but I used to get them photographs of fighting, which I'll show you. I said they are using attack actors to fight on rebels. So, you know, so that way it helped both sides. Next. This is just a small, I mean, maybe slightly trying to flatter myself, but this was from the SRSG, that if you can read the line, I appreciate, since I led the patrol. Just go back. So he just highlighted my assessment and other things. Next. So there are a number of actions which we did since the bell has rung. Next. Now this, mid of the night, there was a call that MSF workers have been attacked. They had actually $60,000. So one had to take fast action, and General Nambia said, Meg. So I said, use the BMPs, surround them and start firing in the air. And BMP fire in the air is with tracers quite terrifying. So hearing BMPs, all of them left, and we were able to rescue this. This in fact became big news. Next. Even the Chinese media published it. Next. And of course, some was in the Indian media. Next. This ambushes on the road used to take place, as I said, and motivating my sector to guard and do road protection and not relying always on was a big challenge, but we did it. The next photo is not so good. I mean, just to show you the type of violence, you can show it for a while. Next. So these are the kind of things which used to happen, and this was the condition of the road which we had to protect. Next. Governor, this again, next. Now, really, I was at that place where they said we are not fighting. So, in fact, these are BMPs and stray bullets which were this thing. So, we used to take photographs and tell them that you're fighting and you're not, I mean, adhering to the peace. This thing. So, that did make an effect. Next. This is a complicated slide, but what happened was I was walking when the RPG cell burst right in front of me. In fact, it was, they said it's the artifact from the rebel. I said artifact, no, sir, because we were able to recover the projectile and I said it's the RPG and calculated the TAN, did some technical calculations and told them we have fired from there and we went and nabbed those people. So again, it was something, you know, a task which you could do. Next. This was the RPG shell. I said it's not an artifact, it's an RPG shell. Okay, next. This was again, you know, rescue missions were launched. That was of course under fire, but this I'm highlighting is these NGOs relied on their assessment. I told them that you're going to get attacked or something, please don't go. But when they got attacked, and then we rescued them, then they thanked us. Next. Now this was another thing. The next, since it was a lifeline, we wouldn't have imagined we were trying to recover aircraft which were there because all these airstrips were muddy. So this was another task. Next. Now this age set class is another something which is unique. So each of these ages fight with the other age to gain dominance. So they will kill and they will do anything. So this Lango, Botnia, TT, so these age set classes also used to happen in my area. Next. And we had to protect these people of other age sets. So these news that informed is protected. Next. Pachala, this next. You see, I had this thing right next to Ethiopia. These people went across and abducted 135 children from Ethiopia. So one had to negotiate, and I had a problem because I had an Ethiopian battalion with me. And if you see the last point, the soldiers there didn't allow WFP aircraft to take off. They said no salaries again on it. So these were the things which were happening on a daily basis. So I've just shown you some examples. Next. This was again Dinka-Pole clashes. Again, it was negotiation. And if you see the amount of violence which was created in cattle is something which they were fighting for. Next. So QIPs, as ADSG mentioned, this was launched there, the same Sadbhavna angle. Next. And one could obtain an agreement that they will not fight and it at least sustain for at least the time I was there. Next. Between Dinka and Mule. Next. Just about on the Indian mission, Sri Kumar Menon, ambassador was, we had a very good synergy. In fact, he being slightly under threat, we used to give him full protection and we had, as Indians, we had good standing in the UN. And he from his side, because he was also doing, we built a hospital and other things. So India had a really good image there. Next. So since the synergy was good with the ambassador's help, we could get this cultural show organized in my secretariat quarters. So it really was much appreciated. Next. And there was the two civilians, Indians, they used to come illegally and work for the oil. They got kidnapped by the rebels. So I had very good links with these guys. I got them released. So the news, if you read, you see the ambassador, because he was in Juba, he had to praise the government and say thank you. So the rebels took this out. If you see in red, instead of praising Rick Machar, Indian ambassador turns around and prays of Gandhi. I'm just highlighting this is how complexity of the situation occurs on ground where you have to manage all these issues. Next. This was again a small report of the ambassador where he met the SRSG and SRSG praised the Indian who were doing their job. I'm showing this photo. Popo, Mr. Sri Kumar Menon, he's retired now. He's in Trivandrum. I'm in touch with him. This Akopo is something, this was vacated by us. So this was a site when I came in, I said I will reoccupy, and I did that. And this is the time when I took the SRSG and explained we had some BMPs, and also we took back what was slightly small point, because this was the most dangerous place in all of South Sudan. Next. Okay, last few slides, training was done the Indian way. So, I had to get everybody rallied because I thought if things are to be done, then you have to make sure everybody does his job next. So this exercise plan and all was there, which was practice on next. Just go back. You see, I just want to show this on the Ethiopian trial, not to deride anything. But when they came, the first February was how they were doing training. But slowly, from just sitting around and reluctant army, they became also jumped up. In fact, this chap was doing a radio this thing with the Indian battalion. I said, आपस में communication होना चाहिए. Next. Media, of course, there was a lot of media. The only small point I have is we were covered by all, but Indian media, of course, just wrote negative, but they didn't come there. You had Reuters, you had everybody coming and covering. There was a British company making engineering thing. So they highlighted them as if they are fighting war in South Sudan, whereas they were just inside the base. And there was another, this news of saving was published in Washington Post without giving the R credit. So this was published as a feed by one of our prominent channels, which they say except the feed, everything is the same. So I wrote to the channel that what has been done there has been done by us. So when I wrote to them, they wrote the feed instead of including a name. Next. So this doctors did a good job. Vets, cattle did a good job. Next. Engineering company also making roads. Next. And of course, Indian media were praised by UN officials. So this was we looked after the sick and also enough of also, but I always got a feeling it is not coming there. Next. And if you can just go with this news, this was when they abandoned the post, the Chinese. But this news, I'm sure you're not heard of it. This was in the just go back. So it is scathing attack on Chinese. They abandoned their post, and you can read the first line. But this news and this kind of a thing never came out because obviously money works. Okay, next. Last is these two slides. As you said, this is a time, so I was feeling emotional why they abandoned it. And the slide below is the Korean CEO. He had just come in. In fact, he was trying to highlight that how can you have a country without roads? And he was trying to highlight how much good work he has done. And he was saying, he was saying it with a thing as if I've never seen it. So I didn't tell him that in our country there are worse roads than this. Next. And of course, there was a proposal. This again, diplomacy. They were really, in line with whatever I said. They said we'll give you also for training, we'll do this and all. I did send it to the SD and I may have gone, but definitely, I think it's not happening on the ground. I don't know. Because the chiefs also used to change every 6 months, so I don't know whether the current chief. Next. Thank you from the. This was the I think I had a very interesting and most of because did something positive, but most of because no casualty from the sector of the Indians. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. That was very good. I think it's good to hear from, first-hand experience from the field in recent times, not like our old historical stuff. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we also we have another, I think, coming to us. I believe you're being connected to the contingent in the Congo for 5 minutes. Am I right? So we'll before we get on to you.
Good morning, sir, and good morning to the chair and all the distinguished panelists. I'm Brigadier General Arindam Saha. I'm commanding the 301 Brigade, which is deployed in MONUSCO. Very quickly, I'll just share my presentation and cover a few aspects as it relates to the Congo and its current dynamics. I hope the panel can see the presentation that is there. The first question that anybody asks is why Congo and how is it different from the many things? Just to highlight a few things, it's one country which has got a 24 trillion USD of natural resources, which is greater than the total GDP of US and the European Union put together. It has got the second largest oil reserves, the 30 billion cubic meter of methane, second largest tropical rainforest, and an arable land that can feed the entire African nation. It has got a Congo River with a huge, almost 1 lakh megawatt hydro potential. So the question is that this is the center of gravity of the entire Africa, but why has it not really come up? It's because of the things that we can see here. The abysmally low GDP, the abysmally low human quotient, the basic necessities are down to almost nil. It is the illegal smuggling here is 40 times that of what the legal trading on minerals takes place. And the government is absolutely kleptocracy. You have to feed the government rather than feeding the population. And therefore, today, within here, also, if we look at the strengths and weaknesses, also lies the challenges and opportunities both for India and where it really needs to step in an order in case and the huge amount of opportunities that lies. Though unfortunately, the Congo's blessings today actually turns out to be its biggest curse. When we look at the Congo and we look at the geopolitics of the Congo as it exists today, by and large, the Congo as a nation state has stabilized itself, and though it only the problem that it has is currently with the Uganda, Rwanda, and in case we look at the sizes of Uganda and Rwanda vis-a-vis the Congo, it is but natural that Lebensraum is actually expanding itself. And the biggest problem, or also the problem of insurgency or the trouble that is brewing in the eastern part of the Congo is reflective here in this part. Some of the slides are not moving. I think I'll have to request the chair. At least I can't see it in my thing. Anyway, sir, I'll just go forward. I think there's some problem with the technical connectivity, and I really don't know whether the chair can hear me.
We can.
Unfortunately, the slides are not moving, sir. There is a problem. I'll just go ahead without it. So therefore, sir, the problem that exists today is only with the Uganda and the Rwandan borders, and therefore the problem that is emanating or the manifesting are here. And so therefore, what actually it is only the North Kivu and the South Kivu where we can see where the problems are. Therefore, it is just about 10% of the area where the problem is brewing in the eastern part of the Congo, which is having its influences in the entire issue on actually getting the state to in a state of jeopardy that it is in. Just to give an example, in the entire state of DRC, which is 2/3 the size of India, the metal road is just about 2,000 kilometers, and therefore this is where also the problem gets multiplied further. As we look at it, sir, in case on the north is the Force Intervention Brigade, or rather the Bangladesh Brigade, which is in the northern part, followed by the African Brigade, which is also called the Force Intervention Brigade, and followed by in the central sector is India, and further south is the Pakistani Brigade. The most of the volatility or the violence of the number of armed groups actually is in the area of the central sector, where it is creating the huge amount of the problems. And therefore the challenges lie, and also the Indian Brigade that is here today has almost 3 battalions. So, I will just take a second, sir, to stop the screen sharing and then come back. I will just, I think we have come back, sir, and I think now the thing is also there. So now in case we see, sir, the central sector is in the area of the Goma, where the headquarters are, and it further to the north of it. There is a huge, the maximum part of the resources other than the Katanga province, which is in the south, lies in the area of the Indian Brigade, to the west of the Indian Brigade. and therefore it forms the main supply chain through which all the minerals are moving, and therefore all the armed groups predominantly are present. However, as of now, the Beni, where it is written, the FIB brigade is becoming more and more a problem where the ADF, which is the Islamic-based groups from the Uganda, are creating the problems and merciless killing. Despite FIB, the African brigade having one of the shortest area, the Indian brigade, which is spread over in 66,000 square kilometers, have been today asked to extend its footfall further to the north into the area of the African brigade, which speaks volumes of the contribution to the Indian brigade over the years have been making in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The problem of the Congo gets further aggravated by the very fact, and in case I can give you some figures, of all the human rights violations which takes place, 55% of it, as per the UNGHRO published just about a few days back, 55% of it are contributed to the various government agencies, including the FARDC, which is the army of the government of Republic of Congo, and the PNC. So therefore, by and large, the people are actually between the devil and the deep sea, and therefore they have reposed their maximum trust on MONUSCO, and they've gone on record to say that they have greater faith in Congo or on the MONUSCO in Congo than that of any other agencies. Further, sir, as we look at it, sir, I think, so therefore, sir, now when we look at it, sir, India has been here since 1960. We have, that is where one of the brigade, almost 11,000 troops got deployed. And finally, once again, we got redeployed in Monuk in 2005. Till now, we have had 53 fatal casualties and 161 non-fatal. Captain G.S. Salaria got his PVC here. Currently, that the Indian brigade that is there, we have got the 2 battalions, the level 3 hospital, and the INDFU, and there are almost 46 MILOBs who are deployed here. When we look at with this, that means we have got barely about 1,700 troops on ground, and in case we take, the Indian brigade also has a Moroccan battalion which has been placed under command. So with just about 2,100 troops, we are looking at almost 73,000 square kilometers, expanding over 5 territories. And in case we take a troop versus area that we are dominating, it comes to almost 1 man in every 32 square kilometers. But within this, the Indian sector also has 36% of the entire armed rebels of the DRC. So it's a huge challenge that we are living it. But even despite all this, the Indian sector has continued to remain, by and large, one of the most stable sectors in the entire DRC. I will not go very further, sir. I know the time is at a premium. Now, when we look at this is the figure which is happening just about from the 1st of January this year. In the month of March, the government of DRC declared état de siege, or the state of siege, or that means what we call the military rule. And there has been a greater coordination between the entire FARDC and the MONUSCO force and the Indian brigade. And there has been a huge amount of surrenders that we have been able to extricate, and also the apprehensions, and also a certain amount of killings. We have not been able, it's not only the hard power that we have applied over the period, and it is also a large number of soft power, and therefore overall a smart power that the Indian brigade have been able to exercise. And coupled with it, where in case we see the news is where the MONUSCO there are a large number of blames of sexual exploitation and abuse. It is the Indian brigade which have kept itself absolutely clear, and therefore is operating from a very, very high moral platform. Apart from this, the medical assistances that we are providing, and also the capacity building to the FARDC is phenomenal. And we have also received requests to train the FARDC, something that is being considered. We have also, on our own resources, what we do as a WAM measure on ground, we have in back home in the country. Here we have gone in for the skill development of our own resources, which have actually given us a very strong footing. And in case we look at whether is it yielding results, the answer is yes. The prominent red line is the number of surrenders. We had a huge amount of surrenders between July and September. It declined, and thereafter once again it is picking up. And we are actually, the Indian Brigade has the largest number of surrenders of the armed group cadres in the entire DRC. We have been able to keep all other factors which actually decide the effectiveness of a force, military force, in terms of killings, the inter-ethnic clashes, or the prevention of the internally displaced people. We are one of the highest. It is not just that.
You'll have to wind up, please. You'll have to wind up.
Yes.
May I request you to conclude?
Yes, sir. And apart from this, what we have said, sir, it is also in the recently when the Niara Congo volcano erupted after almost 20 years, the Indian Brigade was was where it was affected, and that is where we have played a stellar role. Overall, sir, I think I'll finish it off here, sir. We have been contributing our bit, and and it is now at other levels that we need to exploit what the Indian force has been contributing in so many ways to make its footprints into this one of the richest country of the world in this and make certain advantages for the India. Thank you, sir, and I have finished, sir.
Yeah. Wish you all the luck in whatever you're doing, if you can hear me. Thank you very much for that presentation, Brigadier Saha. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we now have our Air Force colleague to speak to us. Air Vice Marshal Bahadur will talk on the use of air power in UN peacekeeping based on his personal experience, I think, in the Sudan. So over to you, Bahadur.
Thank you, sir. And greetings to everybody in the hall and listening on virtually. Thank you very much for calling me, sir. If I can just get a thumbs up from someone to say that you can hear me, sir. Okay, I see the crowd and that's good. All right, I will have a very short presentation, sir, and I'll stick to my 10 minutes. I will be speaking on air operations in UN missions and the opportunities to leverage technology. And that is, part of it is connected with what General Litter spoke a little earlier. We talk of air power in peacekeeping. We talk of air power in peace enforcement. But I think we all agree that finally it comes down to peace assurance. That is where the meat of the matter is. So, because when you see this conflict spectrum, if you notice the center part, you would have seen it in various forms. That's where air power and land power come together. Land power, the black portion at the bottom, you see the line, is most effective because you are all in contact with the people. We are a support in all the operations that are happening in the center and sometimes in the offensive when required. But we need to be a little careful, as I will cover. So why does it need special handling? We know all these three things, but when it comes to the concept of a robust mandate, authorizing peacekeepers all necessary means, that's where we need to be a little careful. It is not a Chapter 7 authorization, but it needs examination due to the highly potent capabilities of air power. And that was referred to on the issue of the social media and the weaponization of information. Because when we see this, that there are 16 members of the Security Council, the 15 national reps in CNN, that conveys the fact that we, while wearing the blue berets and operating there, are under a glare, under a microscope, and being looked at with a different standard that is expected from us. So from a strategic perch, we can actually put the effects of air power in three issues. One, capability enhancement. Second is conveying of intent. And the net result of the above two, which is boosting the credibility of UN forces. Let's take the first one, capability. We all agree that we would have succeeded if we leave behind an environment that engenders peace once the blue berets leave. So air power comes in for quick transportation, logistics, personnel, etc. And equally importantly, building development infrastructure and raising institutions that support nationhood. That's the meat of the matter. But once again, I get back to robust peacekeeping. It's not only timely use of force by ground troops, but also the availability of offensive air assets like armed or attack helicopters that gives the force deterrence capability, as we saw in MONUSCO and ONUC. way back in 1961. And that's the shot of the Canberras leaving Agra, that's the Agra tarmac, leaving for Congo in 1961 and deployed in the Congo. This is a shot from there. Second, we covered the capability, now the intent. Now, the equipping of a UN mission is a pointer to the intent of the mission. That is an intangible, but it's visible to people. I give my example. General Litter was the force commander when I was there in UNMISS in 2005, 2006 at Kadugli. The aim was to create, the mandate was to create a favorable condition for conduct of a peaceful referendum. We were equipped with 6 Mi-17s for logistic support only. And so were the other contingents, the Pakistanis and the Russians. So my query to you, and this is possibly hindsight, because we saw a whole lot of violence 2011 and later. So did the non-availability of offensive air power escalate the defense of the mandate? Was the credibility affected because of the violence that came up once people came closer to 2011? And this is Kadugli. It was so peaceful in 2005, 2006 when we were there. We had 6 Mi-17s and this is the Kadugli disbursement. The last portion is credibility. This is a famous quote of the first Secretary General. Peacekeeping is not a job for soldiers, but only soldiers can do it. And that is where the credibility of the peacekeeping operations becomes very relevant. So I propose to you that the UN missions must have adequate and relevant resources to defend the mandate. I take an example of the delayed entry of UAVs in Mono as I go along. We must also consider that low casualty threshold is no longer the preserve of advanced nations. That they can continue to give money and finance, but keep their troops away because the casualty threshold is low. Sorry, that's changed. And equipping missions, future missions with modern air power assets, space, and AI enabled. General Litter talked about the human being taking decisions, but the human being decision making needs to be assisted now with AI enabled systems. Because if you don't do it, then certain belligerents in certain countries would use that, and the UN troops would be playing catch-up. Credibility would be affected. That's the Mi-35 in Congo, and that's the UAV which came in about 6 years back in Mono. These are Italian Falcons. So, give you an example as a case study of the UAV saga in Monoscope. Even now, the demand process is, it goes from the sector headquarters, the ground commander demands from the sector headquarters, the request goes to force headquarters, it goes to the civil operator, the feed comes back to the force headquarters. It doesn't go back to the operator. It goes back to sector headquarters, and then it goes to the person on ground who demanded it. Time elapsed. Anyway, this is the time frame. I've spoken to certain people out there. Unfortunately, this is what it is. TCCs are operating on quadricopters, and these are not part of the MOUs. Now, if most of the TCCs out there have brought along their quadcopters, because it's part of our infantry battalion or company now, shouldn't that be part of the MOU so that the intent is made clear right from the beginning? I believe in Congo, the FARDC has some UAVs of its own, but that requires better coordination. And if you talk of satellite imagery, my answer to that is, what's that? As far as UN missions are concerned, or as far as MONUSCO is concerned. This is the current deployment of civilian and military air assets in UN peacekeeping operations. I don't expect you to read this, but I've highlighted two, that is Mali and Congo. If you see the number of air assets, helicopters and UAVs, because I will correlate it to what we as a country, as India, when we gave between 2003 and 2011. These UAVs in Mali are part of the MOU, most of them. And this is what is the MINUSMA deployment. You see the male UAVs, that is the medium altitude, long endurance. There are the Heron class which are there. which is very good. And this is part of the MOU. So there is forward progress, but this should happen in almost all the contingents that have been that are going on or that will come up. And so also are the tactical UAVs mentioned below. This is interesting. When you see the aviation expenditure, you realize that the fixed wing, which is the dark blue at the bottom, has been increasing but is gradually constant. What has increased in the center here is for the UAVs that you see, and is for the helicopters that you see. The UAVs are only in the corner here, that is 2014 onwards. Luckily, the United Nations or the DPKO has understood the importance and possibly accepting the requests of TCCs and putting that in the MOU. The expenditure on the UAVs is increasing, and that is good. The last two slides of mine, this is what India has given to the UNPKO. 61, 6 Canberras. 6 Canberras. No other country has given an aircraft that was phased out just about 15 years back. Somalia, 2 anti-tank guided missile Chetaks. Sierra Leone, huge contingent. 4 Mi-8s, 4 Chetaks, 3 Mi-35s. MONUC and UNMISS. See this time frame, 2003 to roughly 2011. We had 29 helicopters, Indian helicopters in these 2 missions. This is huge. No country has ever given this as part of its commitment to UN peacekeeping. The 4 Army Aviation Cheetahs continued a little more. I think they went up till 2013 or 14. The Air Force withdrew around 2010-11. But this is what it is. So in summations, AirPro and UN Ops can be effective only if it is integrated with ground forces. This is a given. It has to be jointly integrated right from the word go and not as an add-on, as a last thought. And may I say that the reverse is also true. If we want more effectiveness of the ground forces, please get air power requirement fed in right from the beginning. The MOUs now must include adequate and contemporary assets, aerial assets. So the part of the MOU with the TCCs, they should gradually go on to space and AI enabled. Otherwise, we will be playing catch up, as I brought out earlier. And finally, the commander on ground must have direct access to info gained from aerial assets. If he gets this a day, 2 days, 12 hours later, it may perhaps be of no use. Thank you very much. I have finished.
Thank you very much, Manmohan. I think India can be proud of the contribution air assets that we have provided to UN missions. Very good. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have Ms. Rachita Bhandari, the Director, UNP, the Ministry of External Affairs, speak to us on India and UN peacekeeping, past, present, and future. Over to you, Rachita.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm just trying to share a PPT with all of you. And I hope you can hear me and that you can see the PPT.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
See is that the one? Yeah.
May I begin, sir, if you can all see it and hear me?
This one. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, and I hope you can see the PPT, sir, because I've shared it now.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. To begin with, so I'll just introduce myself very quickly. So my name is Rachita Bhandari. I'm a director in the United Nations Political Division in the Ministry of External Affairs. And UN peacekeeping comes under our mandate in the UNP division. So thank you very much for this opportunity, for allowing me to speak. And here we go. So this is just a slide on how India has been a pioneer in UN peacekeeping. I'm sure that other participants today must be much more aware than I am about our contribution, but this is what we convey as the Ministry of External Affairs when we talk to our interlocutors. The fact that we have deployed more than 250,000 Indian troops across 49 missions, and this in cumulative terms has been the highest number by any troop contributing country. And 174 gallant Indian soldiers have laid down their lives in the line of duty, again, which is the highest number of casualties by any TCC. Currently, I understand we have about 5,506 Indian troops that are deployed across 9 missions, and that makes India come up to the rank of number 2 among the TCCs. So the time that I have spent at my desk, I have seen India move between 2 and 5. It keeps going up and down. And I understand that Bangladesh is currently at number 1. We have troops deployed across 4 missions, as you're all aware, 2 Chapter 7 missions, UNMISS and MONUSCO, and 2 Chapter 6 missions, UNIFIL and UNDOF. And another development, I don't know if others are aware about this, but prior to the second wave of the pandemic in India in March, we had donated 200,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines for UN peacekeepers all around the world, not just Indian peacekeepers, but all peacekeepers from all countries. And this gesture of India's was greatly appreciated by the UN Secretary General as well as by other countries. Indian peacekeepers going the extra mile, again, something that I'm sure, that the other participants are aware about how we have provided medical care, skill development, road rehabilitation, veterinary and farming support, and very recently how we were the first responders while evacuating civilians during the volcanic eruption in Goma. Another humanitarian gesture on behalf of Indian peacekeepers, which brought us great appreciation within the UN context. So I would like to use this opportunity to brief you all a bit about the UNSC and about what India has been doing about peacekeeping in the UNSC. So just to give you a background, India has been elected as a non-permanent member in the United Nations Security Council for the term 2021-2022. And the elections of this took place in July 2020. And we are all very proud of the fact that we won with an overwhelming majority of 184 votes out of the 193 votes that were cast. And this is the 8th time that India is serving on the UNSC. And during this particular presidency, we'll have 2 presidencies during this tenure. One was recently held in August 2021, and another one will be held in December 2022, just before we exit the UNSC. So one of our main priorities during our August 2021 presidency was a signature event on peacekeeping. And we had our External Affairs Minister preside over the UNSC and chair the signature event. And we had 4 very important outcomes which came out from this particular meeting, which I've listed on this slide. One was a resolution against impunity, also titled Protecting the Protectors. Another was a PRST, which is a presidential statement, which was adopted by all UNSC members by consensus on enhancing the use of technology in UN peacekeeping missions. The third was India's contribution to the UniteAware platform. I will talk a bit about it later. And the last was the signing of an MOU between the UN and India for training of peacekeepers with the help of our premier institute, CUNPK. So this is a slide about the solemn ceremony, sir, that was held in New York, in the gardens, at the UN Peacekeepers Memorial. And as you can see from the photographs, there's External Affairs Minister, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who are paying their respects at the UN Peacekeepers Memorial. EM, in fact, said that peacekeeping is a high calling and the noblest duty, which was well appreciated by all. And just as a figure, about more than 1 million troops from various countries, including 250,000 from India, 1/4 from India, have served under the UN flag since UN peacekeeping's inception in 1948. So several troops have laid down their lives, and therefore we thought that this gesture was very important during our presidency, especially in view of the fact that India is one of the largest TCCs to the UN. Moving forward, this is the first outcome document that I was talking about. This is a UNSC resolution that was adopted under our presidency, under India's presidency, on protecting the protectors. Interestingly, this was the first UNSC resolution that was piloted by India almost after 4 decades in the UNSC. We are very proud of the fact that this was unanimously adopted by consensus by all 15 UNSC members, as well as it gained the support of another 80 UNGA, UN General Assembly members, countries that are not on the council. And it was widely appreciated because it draws attention towards ensuring accountability for the crimes that are committed against UN peacekeepers. So this was a new initiative that won India much appreciation within UN circles. The second outcome is the debate that we had on technology and peacekeeping, and the adoption of a presidential statement, which was about utilizing technology to assist peacekeepers and generally encouraging the use of modern technology for peacekeepers to operate in an increasingly complex and risky environment. So the idea behind this initiative was to bring India's strengths in both peacekeeping as well as IT technology together so as to have a deliverable. Again, this was adopted by consensus by all UNSC member states. The third one is the Unite Aware platform. And now this is something that the UN has been taking forward, and India has partnered with the UN. We have not just made a financial contribution, as you can see, I've mentioned the figure of US dollars 1.64 million. We are contributing further to the UN for the rollout of this Unite Aware platform, but we have become their partner in taking this particular initiative forward. And the idea about this is to provide situational awareness. So real-time ground situation, modern surveillance techniques for asymmetric threats, mobile early warning systems, live vehicle, personnel, and aircraft tracking, and so on and so forth. This is going to be rolled out in 4 peacekeeping missions initially, in Mali, in South Sudan, in Cyprus, and Somalia, and then it will be taken even further after the pilot projects are complete. And the fourth is, of course, MOU that we have signed, India and the UN. This is to enhance the training and capacity building of peacekeepers and partnership for technology in peacekeeping. Our premier institute, the CUNPK, will take this forward for us. I must put in a word for CUNPK as well. There is much appreciation for the excellent work that CUNPK is doing, and a lot of countries have acknowledged the excellent training that their peacekeepers have received from various training programs conducted under the CUNPK. Moving forward, looking ahead towards the future, there are 4 proposals that we are currently looking at in MEA with MOD. One is, of course, deployment of air assets to MINUSMA in Mali. The second is the deployment of an Indian naval asset, the Maritime Task Force of UNIFIL in Lebanon. We are just waiting for the vacancy to arise, and as soon as that happens, our deployment will go ahead. And the last two are about new troop deployments. One is to MINUSCA in the Central African Republic, and the other is to UNISFA in Abyei, which is between Sudan and South Sudan. So hopefully all these proposals will go through, and we would be able to further enlarge our UN peacekeeping footprint. I just have a few slides here on the sacrifices of the Indian peacekeepers, and of course the left is on our domestic awards, but on the right we have the acknowledgement by the UN of peacekeepers, Indian peacekeepers that have laid down their lives, and the prestigious Dag Hammarskjöld Medal, which has been awarded to several Indian peacekeepers. Again, Indian troops in South Sudan have been awarded UN medals very recently this month. We saw some tweets and some photographs of that. Another very interesting development has been about Major Suman Gavani. I must mention her because, you know, in the UN, when we talk about the WPS agenda, which is the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So if we have this intersection of peacekeeping as well as women, then that brings us even further acknowledgement and appreciation of the work done by us. So Major Suman Gavani, who was earlier deployed with UNMISS, was awarded the UN Military Gender Advocate of the Year Award for 2019 for mentoring over 230 UN military observers. So if there's any way that we can enhance deployment of women Indian troops across Indian missions, that would go a long way in acknowledging India's contribution in this matter. Moving forward, I continue with the WPS agenda. This particular deployment of that all-female police unit to Liberia, which was 2007 to 16, till today, President Sirleaf, the former president of Liberia, she says that she acknowledges the immense contribution made by them and says that if they were ever to come back, we would be very happy to have them. And the presence of the Indian police unit, female police unit, encouraged young girls to join the Liberian army and the Liberian police, and therefore we have an entire generation of young women, Liberian women in the security sector. Very recently, the Indian female engagement in MONUSCO in 2019 has also played a critical role in peacekeeping as well as inspiring women in local communities. So that brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you very much. My entire objective was to just bring in the UNSC angle, considering we are currently on the UNSC, and to bring a little bit of focus on the August presidency and how we have managed to not only discuss but have important outcomes achieved from the meetings that we conducted during our presidency. So thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you all. And I'm afraid I have to leave for another meeting, but I thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachita. Wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir.
Now, next speaker, we have two speakers yet. Rachita Berry will speak to us on India and UN peacekeeping in Africa and assessment. And both you and the next speaker, I mean, if you want lunch, you better stick to your time frame.
Thank you very much, General Lambiar. I'm really glad to be here today in this auditorium speaking about India and the UN peacekeeping in Africa. My presentation, please. As you're aware, Africa has been a critical region in terms of UN peacekeeping. And during the Cold War, there was only one UN peacekeeping mission that was in Congo in 1960. But in the post-Cold War period, especially since the late 80s, you find that a number of peacekeeping missions have taken place in Africa, and India has the record of being among the longest and the largest contributors in human peacekeeping activity in Africa. And India has been involved in the continent from Congo in 1960, and it's present in 4 places at the moment: are peacekeepers in DRC, in South Sudan, in Abyei, and in Western Sahara. So my presentation, I will basically flag 3 points here. First is that India's contribution to the UN peacekeeping operations in Africa is unique due to certain reasons. Second, that it demonstrates India's solidarity with the African countries. And third, that it has also helped in strengthening India's bilateral relations with countries in African region. Next. So what is the major contribution of India towards peacekeeping in Africa? I think first in terms of professionalism, second in terms of dealing with the humanitarian concerns, and third in terms of protection or promotion of gender equality in the continent. Next. So when you talk of professionalism, I acknowledge that India has created a well-trained and professional peacekeeping force across the African continent. Next. And you see that Indian peacekeepers in Congo have garnered much appreciation as this headline screams to you. Next. And secondly, India has really demonstrated its efforts towards promoting gender equality, and that's quite evident by sending the first all-female formed police force in Liberia. It has been talked about since the afternoon, throughout this afternoon. Next. So you find that the former president, Sirleaf, has acknowledged India's contribution in this regard. What I would like to highlight here is that that Liberia had very few people within, very few women which were involved in security sphere, and because of Indian peacekeepers were able to come out in the open and take on us. So there were about 1% women which were deployed in the security field in Liberia before our peacekeepers went there in 2017, and when they were leaving in 2018, they became about 17 in all. Next. The second point that I pointed out was in terms of UN peacekeepers' humanitarian role, and this is highly recognized. Next. In DRC, there have been several presentations about this, how the peacekeepers, our peacekeepers in DRC played a crucial role in evacuation of civilians and UN personnel during the recent volcano eruption in Goma. Next. Secondly, I think it's very important to note that has helped in our peacekeeping effort in Africa, has helped in promoting our solidarity with the African countries, and this is so. This is reflected in the fact that the African countries have also applauded India's efforts, especially at the time in the post period when the large major had withdrawn from peacekeeping or putting boots on ground. That's the time when India came forward and supported the African countries in their endeavor to build a peace and security architecture in the continent and ensure peace in the region. And this is something which Indian ministers, several Indian policymakers have highlighted. Next. So the Indian UN peacekeepers in place in bringing peace and in South Sudan, in the troubled town. This is something which is acknowledged by the South Sudanese, that India has helped in promoting peace. Next. And it has also helped us strengthen relations with the African countries, both at the bilateral and multilateral level. Developing relations with Africa is currently the top priority of Indian government. And this is reflected next by the 10 guiding principles of India's Africa policy. Prime Minister Modi, during his visit to Congo, what they are trying to say is through these principles that India's priority, India's engagement with Africa is guided by the African priorities. So I think keepers have also tried to look in this model of follow this model of India's Africa policy and extend it to the whole in whichever way in enhancing India's relations with the African countries. Next, Indian government has also announced several initiatives for the last 2 decades which would help in promoting ties with the African continent. They are the 4 Focus Africa program for promoting trade, the T9 initiatives focused only in West African countries, the India Africa Forum Summits, the first of them in 2008 and the last in 2015, with the 4th summit in 2020 delayed due to COVID. Also, there have been a number of visits to Africa, which denote India's engagement in Africa. And along with it, there have been several industry level initiatives next. So, has the Indian peace helped in promoting India's relations with Africa? I think this is something which I would say and no. In the sense that I give you the example of Liberia, where the Liberian president was confronted with Indira Gandhi Peace Award in 2013, and I had an opportunity to meet her while this happened. Also, she lauded India's relation with Liberia. This is also peacekeepers in Liberia. There was a tremendous increase in India's trade with Liberia, and a number of Indian companies invested in Liberia. Currently, about 120 Indian companies are present in Liberia. So I would say that Indian peacekeepers' presence, which was widely acknowledged by the Liberian government, promoted India's next. But we also have this headline screaming to us in 2008, which says that Congo doesn't want Indian troops. And why was this happening? This was the time, and unfortunately, few of our peacekeepers were involved in sexual misconduct. They were also involved in gold smuggling, and there was also a case of Indian colonel speaking in favor of Congolese rebel. So that could have led to the Congo government not wanting Indian peacekeepers in Africa. But I think the good news is next. I leave you with this slide. It says that Indian peacekeepers are basically ambassadors of India in the host country. So they need to work towards projecting that image, which is very important. A clean image, a positive image would help in building India's relations with the countries in Africa. And given the fact that India is giving so much priorities in building relations with a continent with whom we have connections going back to 1st century AD, I think the Indian peacekeepers would play a very important role in pushing this relationship forward. I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchita, for that. Now we have Dr. Rajesh Kumar to speak to us on technology and peacekeeping. Can India become a technology contributing country?
Thank you, Chair. I think since I'm the last speaker, I can begin my presentation without any introduction on the topic. So, Piyush. So I have only 4 slides because we don't have much time to discuss all these details for peacekeeping technology. So first slide will discuss the evolution of policies and strategies in the United Nations regarding the peacekeeping and technology. And the second slide listed some of the operational and application level programs of these strategies in the United Nations. And the third one, I'll explain why India should and be in this area, the field of technology and peacekeeping. And the final slide, I'll discuss some of the potential areas of cooperation. So, these are some of the policies, strategies, guidelines, and SOPs related to peacekeeping and technology at the United Nations. I don't think I can explain all these in details because we don't have much time. So one of the things I want to mention, the debate is not a new one. You can trace its root to the Brahimi report of 2000. And the other one I wanted to highlight, the report of the expert panel on technology and innovation in the UN peacekeeping. These report actually focused on employing advanced technology in UN peacekeeping, especially primarily in 2 areas. That's one is the providing basics for missions, and the other one is operational imperatives. So the providing basic means providing security to peacekeepers, shelter, and energy, water, health, and mobility, and so on. The UN is using technologies such as perimeter lighting, motion technology, emergency communication technology, tamper-resistant tracking, IED detection technology, camera technology for light feeds and ground-penetrating radars, and advanced geospatial imaging tools. And for operational imperatives, we are using these command and control monitoring mechanisms and reporting ICT technologies, GIS, satellite imageries, UAVs, and also data. So the other 2 significant latest on the ministerial level of debate and assessment during India's presidency, and secondly, the strategy on digital transformation of UN peacekeeping. These are some the practices, the application level, operational levels, and I don't think I'll get time to explain each of these. But unfortunately, these the names speak for themselves. The SAGE, you see, situation awareness program, and smart IED threat mitigation technology, spatio-temporal incident mapping tool. You have smart camps, UAVs. Speakers before me already discussed this. The notification of peacekeeper casualties database system, early warning tracking. You have this situational awareness program called Unite Aware platform. These are some ideas. India is the largest troop contributor. I don't want to repeat the stat and the numbers. So the one point I want to discuss here, the attacks against peacekeepers are increasing, and we should equip troops with the modern advanced technologies and India's goodwill as well. The third point, the Western technologies are too foreign, costly, and sophisticated. Some of the speakers have mentioned about the generator. So many of these African countries or the developing countries where the peacekeepers are on the ground consider that Western technologies are intrusive. And it's not the sophisticated technologies are not suitable for these developing countries, climatic conditions, and so on. So in India's technology is less cost, cheaper, and suitable for the developing world. So there is a point why India and why not the advanced Western countries can do more in this field. India's initiative many have already discussed, so I want to skip that. And my final slide. These are some out of box suggestions. What more can be done in this area? First one is this, satellites, surveillance, satellite images. These are used extensively used to monitor the movements of conflicting parties and observing arms smuggling. There are examples in Myanmar, in Sudan, Liberia. So India can contribute in this area because the UN doesn't have satellites of its own. It uses the open satellites, the free imageries, and from the private parties. It is costly, and the commercial. One of the problem with this commercial satellite data is it's usually subject to strict copyright and agreement, and that limit how it can be used in particular areas. And so detailed agreement must be negotiated with these private companies. So India has low cost satellite technology, and its space agency can collaborate with the UN for developing dedicated constellation of satellites or analyzing these satellite imageries for peacekeeping missions. Second is energy security. Even though, despite a booming global renewable energy market, the peacekeeping missions are still using traditional, like the fossil fuels, especially diesel power generators in the missions. So this presents very important logistics and security challenges. So India could leverage its solar credentials as a member for the leader of ISA, International Solar Alliance, to support the missions in, especially in Africa. We has contract with some of these MOU with some of these African nations for developing solar projects, especially including Mali, where peacekeeping missions are there. So the third point I want to make, the ICT and ISR training. We have already discussed the MOU with C4ISR center, and here in recent past, India have also established IT and vocational training centers in many of these African countries. So some including Namibia, Ghana, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and some of these centers can be used for training these peacekeepers. The Ghana India Kofi Annan Center for Excellence is there. The Technology Center in Zimbabwe is there. So these centers can be used for training peacekeepers in ICT and the ISR technologies. The final point is digital women. We have this contingency, all women contingent, and the modern peacekeeping is all about participatory peacekeeping, and we can use this all women contingents and train them for becoming digital women peacekeepers and use for them to participatory peacekeeping. To conclude, to sustain India's historical interest and influence in UN peacekeeping operation, India should chart out specific strategies to become a tech contributor country. And however, such a strategy should be balanced and focus on providing technical assistance to missions, training to peacekeepers, and as well as while continuing its contributing troops and transforming the troops into digital peacekeepers. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. Well, now we have the Deputy Director General to make his remarks. General Bakshi. Later.
It is the vote of thanks. You want to make
Yeah,
would you like to make
I would like to, but I think he should do next.
No, you're actually scheduled first. Yes.
Okay, then I'll
Wish to make any closing remarks?
No, I mean, what I'll do is, ladies and gentlemen, we've well overshot the lunch hour. We're getting on to dinner time. So I'll wrap the questions and answer session because we've covered such a wide range of issues that the question would take you easily till dinner time. And I don't think any of you are interested in staying that long in this place. So what I would suggest is that if it's possible, try and put this online in some fashion so that people can raise the questions with the individuals concerned and engage in that. That might be a better idea, I think. So I would, and I would actually have some remarks to make on the basis of what was said, but I think I won't do that now. I'll just make a couple of remarks which I think are important. And here it's related to, though there are some of the speakers expressed great optimism over the UN and its future, others had their own reservations. And as an MT who has been associated with the organization for some time, over the 30 years or so that I've been associated with its activity, I obviously have some reservations about the way the UN is going, not so much UN peacekeeping. I think the UN as an international organization has little future unless it undergoes radical overhaul. And this, I think, many of those who have served with the UN also will agree, it needs overhaul. In fact, UN peacekeeping is probably one of the few activities that confers on it some degree of credibility and is therefore being, the problem is that because of that, it is probably increasingly being used by the powers that be, as it were, to serve their vested interests without any direct investment of personnel and equipment. This is what I think is going to happen. As a springboard for professing to address many of the problems afflicting the international community today, from terrorism to climate change to genocide to intervention operations, peace building, etc. Without, of course, committing any boots on the ground, as it were, or unfortunately, even state-of-the-art equipment resources. This is one of my, I have said this at every forum that I have been privileged to attend, and it's been on for some years. Now, therefore, what I think is, in my view, while it is fine for research scholars and analysts, theorists, and all to engage in the application of UN peacekeeping to, these esoteric issues in glamorous occasions in Europe and the United States of America, my suggestion to the practitioners represented here by the Additional Director General Staff Duties and his colleagues from CUNP, if they're around, and others who are still in service like you, Brad, is that you focus on the gut issues our commanders and troops are likely to face in the mission areas where our troops are deployed. And what are these? Like protection of innocent civilians, women and children, making efforts to bring warring parties together for resolution of conflicts, providing access to basic infrastructure and medical facilities, so on. And one of the points which I would recommend is that what I also advocated long ago, which I want to make, the question of preventive deployment. So, on the subject last week, on the 23rd of September, Rina Sandhu, who she's Secretary West, I think, in the Ministry of External Affairs, practices climate change could be overall extremely important topic. it also warned against building a sort of a parallel climate track, as it were, saying to view conflicts in the poorer parts of the world through the prism of climate change will only serve to present a lopsided narrative, and the reasons for the conflict are to be found elsewhere. So this is all the other crucial point, and I'm very happy to say it because I prepared my remarks, and then I found that it's sort of, you know, highlighting the need to bring the focus back where it should be, fighting climate change, he said. India is a leader in climate and on track to meet its commitments under the Paris Agreement on climate change. World's growing energy program. So you know this, because I found a number of seminars focused on peacekeeping and climate change and wildlife protection or something like that. And here again, I noticed that at the same meeting, China's representative similarly warned against sidestepping the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, the main international negotiating channels on the issue, emphasizing that the Council lacks the necessary specialized tools and knowledge. That's right. That it should therefore refrain from including climate change in UN peacekeeping mandates, so as not to diminish the ability of peace operations to deliver on their core tasks. These are India and China. When I come to my advice, whatever it is worth is, that rather than focusing in dialogues and conferences in countries that are no longer, participating in peacekeeping, you guys, it would be more useful for you to engage in discussions for recognition of concepts and operational principles with representatives, scholars, analysts from countries that now provide the forces for UN peacekeeping. Like Ethiopia, Rwanda, there's so many of them now, Bangladesh, Nepal, Egypt, Indonesia. Like among the top, I think, I don't know, you can go 50 or 60, there's no developed country almost in the top plots. And these are the people who are working with you. And not only involve operational concepts and philosophies, but also insist that key command and staff positions at UNWTO and the commission areas must be held by these countries that provide the tools. Whatever you want to do, if you want us to let you our voices, their own is available. But that would be my suggestion. As I said, there's a lot more on me to say, but so I won't say anything more. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure chairing this webinar. In fact, it's one of my most poorly conducted webinars in terms of managing the time so far. But the issues were so I think vital that there was no way I could have stopped you guys from expressing your views. And I think I personally have derived a great deal from being around, listening to the views that have been expressed, also from the field and from practitioners like those of you who came out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm a listed entity, though not in terms of the UN listing, but I accuse myself in the interest of time. Just 2 words. A very big thank you to all of you.
Thank you, sir. General Nambiar and Ambassador Nambiar, our DG, Ambassador Chinoy, all the other speakers, both physical and virtual, our esteemed guests who have come to us, particularly from the armed forces and others, and all our participants. On behalf of the team IDSA, it is my proud privilege to propose a word of thanks and my extreme gratitude for all of you for sparing your time and joining this event. In particular, I'd like to thank the speakers who have been very lucid, very candid, I would say, with some very incisive comments and some excellent new pointers we have got. I would like to touch upon just a minute of my personal experience. I've been a UN peacekeeper in Angola. I dug out and pulled out my tie and my equipment. So when I landed in Angola, as a part of the unarmed staff, I was a bit puzzled as to what am I going to do here. I'm a soldier. I am taught how to fight and kill people. How am I going to keep the peace? And how am I going to learn to negotiate? So we went in for an ops briefing, and in the ops room, on a big banner on the side, was the same quote which has been earlier quoted just now. Peacekeeping is not a soldier's job. Only a soldier can do it. Which was quoted by A.B.M. Bahadur also by Dag Hammarskjöld. When I looked at that, and I looked at the op briefing, I realized that we are the people who can do it. So I went on to participate there, learned peacekeeping, learned diplomacy a bit, also learned a bit of Portuguese and some Kizomba dance on the Tikongo music which came from Zaire. And I realized that as soldiers, we gel very well with the military, which is in control on both sides in most of the cases. It's easy for us to sustain long journeys, stay in barracks, go overnight, stay in tent somewhere, and we don't, get hassled by it, and we can go on and do our jobs. So, and we also understand the military aspects quite well. So, peacekeeping, therefore, is here to stay with the soldiers. I'd like to thank the DG for having conceptualized this wonderful event. We have put in so many people which we couldn't even imagine. I'd like to thank particularly Colonel Pillai and our head of the Eloquence Center, Ruchita, and the whole center for putting it together. The young team who has been there with us, Sindhu, the rapporteurs who will now work on it further, Jason and Nandita and Vipandi, the AD and the conference cell, and our Adam staff to help us to support. So thank you very much once again.